Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
In the sewing shop the work was boiling, masters were stitching, dyeing and embroidering. A young girl, Carolina, was on a special account with her superiors. She was praised for her diligence, kind and non-conflict character, and was regularly awarded bonuses. At last it was lunchtime. The women laid out supplies on the table. They ate and talked. "Caroline, why are you glowing today? We noticed at once. Something important on your mind. Come on, tell us what happened." The girl was in a hurry to share her joy with her colleagues. "Yesterday the notary called, made an appointment, said about the inheritance. So I'm happy. It's my beloved grandfather took care of me. He raised me, we lived soul to soul. He has a cottage in the country. There are such beautiful places. A clear, deep lake, a forest, mushrooms, berries. So he bequeathed his house to me after his death. Today I'll tell Scott that I've got the inheritance." Molly shook her head. "What's that for? Don't be in a hurry to tell your fiancé everything. You've only been dating for a short time. You don't really know anything. I've lived here all my life, and I've never heard of the Hendersons. And I don't know what your Scott's up to either. Be careful. Don't trust too much. Find out who your boyfriend is before you share that kind of news. You're naive. Have you even been to his house? Did he invite you to visit?" Caroline pouted her lips and even took offense. "What are you saying, Aunt Molly? As if you were jealous of my happiness. My Scott's not easy. He has his own consulting agency. He told me so himself. I didn't really know what it was, so I didn't really ask. And I know his address. And I've had dinner with his mom twice in a restaurant. And he loves me, and he's already hinted at marriage. So we're serious. And my grandfather's house is dear to me as a memory. It's where I spent my childhood. If you invest in it, you can build a great holiday home. I could go there with my family, have a summer holiday." The women shouted at Molly too, and she stopped teaching Caroline about life. And she was still in the clouds, remembering how romantically she and Scott had met. Is that only in novels or films? And the simple village girl, who worked as a seamstress, had never dreamed that such a handsome man would fall in love with her. Caroline knew almost nothing about her parents and did not remember them. Her grandparents raised her from the age of 3 in the village. When Carolina grew older, of course, she asked many questions about her dad and mom. But Grandpa would answer sharply, "I don't know who your daddy is. And your mom's no good. My daughter Chloe gave birth to you from who knows who and left you. She said it was for the summer, but it turned out to be for life. And she's disappeared somewhere. She's got only new suitors. So forget about her. End of story." Caroline always remembered her childhood with special warmth. An old but good house, a Russian stove, firewood, woks, a poker, and her grandmother's delicious chowder, consisting of only 3 ingredients: onions, potatoes, and eggs. But how delicious it was. Or her okrushkon gas made of black bread with homemade sour cream. The taste is unforgettable. All day long you could run barefoot in the fields, on the grass, climb trees, eat unwashed apples, and pears straight from the branch. In the evenings, Grandma knitted socks and mittens, and Carolina helped her wind the yarn and listened to long, slightly scary, but very interesting fairy tales. Carolina was 10 when her beloved grandmother passed away. She died so suddenly. A heart attack. Grandpa turned black with grief, kept crying and crying for his Maggie in heaven. They'd lived their whole lives in perfect harmony. From then on, Granddaddy pulled his granddaughter alone. He was a fisherman, often went fishing with the men. He taught Carolina this craft. Already at 13, the girl knew all kinds of bait and lures. And she could tie a hook or change a float in seconds. She learned to clean even the nasty roughs and fry redfish to a golden crust in sour cream. And in autumn, she and her grandfather started another trade, mushroom hunting. It was also a quiet hunt. They would get up in the dark, put on rubber boots, take a huge bag with a big rucksack and go into the forest. Caroline remembered her grandfather's advice and instructions for the rest of her life. He loved to philosophize. Remember, granddaughter, Mother Nature, she is alive, she can bestow, and may take offense. So you should treat her with care. Don't trample on mushrooms, don't destroy the mushroom. Carefully cut mushrooms and cover that place with moss and leaves so that it does not dry out. Don't be greedy, take as much as you can eat. And don't forget to say thank you. Then the way will be easy, you won't get lost, and you'll come back with a harvest. After the school graduation, Grandpa let Carolina go back to town. You need to study further, my fish. I see that you have dexterous hands, you yourself sew wood outfits. So go to school to become a seamstress. It's a good job, it'll always feed you, and you won't run out of money. Carolina didn't want to leave, and was even afraid to leave. She hugged her grandfather and lamented. What about you here alone? And how will I be without you? You always help me with advice and deeds. Maybe I'd better stay home? The wise grandfather insisted. It's hard for me to let you go, Caroline, I confess. But there's no other way. You see, our village lives only on fishing. There's no work or suitors for you. And you're young, you need to make your own life. I only ask one thing. If your heart falls in love with someone, don't hurry, don't rush, so you don't get burned like your mom. City boys are like that. They just want to have fun. And then have a baby without a husband. It's embarrassing, you see. Remember, if a man really loves you, he'll marry you. He'll bring you home as his wife. And you don't need any affairs. Don't forget me. Come and see me sometimes and I'll be waiting for you. I'll miss you. Goodbye, my little swallow. It wasn't easy for Caroline to settle in the bustling city. She went straight to college, though. And they gave her a dormitory, but the girl was considered strange. She always confused the buses, could get lost in the neighborhood where she lived, categorically refused from student gatherings, did not walk with anyone, and she didn't even look at boys. And there was no such thing as someone directly into her soul. The classmates with their stupid jokes and ridiculous antics rather repelled, but Caroline was the best in her studies and in practice. After graduation, she got a job in a sewing shop and began to receive a good salary. She rented a flat. Life seemed to be better. She settled down. She only lacked the most important thing, a beloved man by her side. One day, Carolina was invited by a work colleague to a birthday party. The girl returned home in the late evening. She missed the last bus, but it was not very far to walk. She decided to walk. Caroline walked along the dark streets, almost running. She felt uneasy. The weather had turned bad. It was starting to rain. There were no passers-by at all. Suddenly, she was accosted by a guy who came out of a back alley. Hey, beautiful, hello, miss me? We'll cheer you up. Wait a minute. Where are you running to? And come on over here. Have a drink, relax, and we'll warm you up. The trio laughed nastily and started to catch up with the frightened Caroline, who ran away screaming. She was lucky. She managed to run out into the carriageway when the villains caught up with her and surrounded her. Wow, she's so stubborn, and the figure is awesome. So the girl fought back and screamed. People, somebody help me. Get away from me. I'm not going anywhere with you. Let me go. I have to go home. But the villains weren't going to back down. They realized the victim was defenseless and there was no one outside. Indeed, Caroline was terrified, and then a car pulled up right next to them. A tough, athletic guy jumped out and shouted, "Hey, gangsters, get away from the girl. Now, who am I talking to?" He literally in a couple of minutes clicked all three. The scoundrels ran away, cursing both the stranger and the guy who interceded for her. The bloke himself took Caroline's hand and said firmly, "Everybody, calm down, Miran, but you shouldn't go out alone at this late hour. This neighborhood isn't very safe. My name is Scott. Don't be afraid. Get in the car. I'll take you home. Don't cry. Take your handkerchief." Caroline got into the car, wiping away her tears. She was shaking violently. She gave the address and wailed, "Thank you, Scott. I was so scared. I'd never even had a boyfriend before, and now this. I was late for a visit, and I missed my bus. My name's Caroline. I can't believe what they were going to do to me. I feel sick to my stomach." The guy drove the girl home and said, "Okay, Caroline, I'm going to protect you now." Agreed. I really like you, I really do. Such a fragile, delicate, a little naive girl. You have such beautiful brown hair. I can't get enough of you. You're not wearing any makeup. And you're so pretty yourself. Girls are different now. They're not so keen on having fun. They hang themselves, smear makeup on their faces like they're plastering a house. We're different. I've never met anyone like you before. Tomorrow's a day off, so I suggest we go to the cinema, take a walk. Do you mind? Caroline nodded and answered, "It's okay to go for a walk, as long as you don't do anything stupid. I like you too, so I'll be looking forward to seeing you." And so their romance began. Scott wooed Caroline so nicely, took her to the cinema, cafes, gave her flowers. He even introduced her to his mum. They had dinner together in a restaurant. Caroline was worried for nothing. Mrs. Scarlett turned out to be a nice, sweet woman, not at all like a rich lady. She received Caroline well and was glad that her son had found such a nice, modest girl. The girl herself thought that she was very lucky that she and Scott had a mutual love, and the wedding was not far off. She told Scott everything that evening. He even whistled. "Oh, really, Caroline? Where your grandfather's cabin is, it's a tourist spot. I've heard that the plots there are worth a fortune. But your grandfather left you a generous gift. If you sell this land, you can invest it profitably and live a good life, instead of slaving in a garment factory for pennies. That's what we'll do." Yes, Caroline hesitated. She didn't like that the groom had already decided everything for her. She hadn't even been to the notary yet. So she answered sharply, "No, Scott, I'm not going to sell the house. I grew up there. It's very dear to me. On the contrary, I thought it would be a holiday home where the whole family could go in the summer. Even the air there is intoxicating. It's good for your health." The guy did not aggravate the situation, on the contrary, abruptly changed the subject. "Whatever you say, kitten, I'll stay out of it." "Well then, let's get to the second part of your plan, to create a family. Look, I've already ordered a restaurant, counted how many guests will be. It's going to cost a lot of money, plus the dress, the suit, the rings. You know, I just can't go on without you. I can't believe we're all living apart like children. You're still holding me back, and I'm 30 years old. I want to kiss you and open the world of love to you. I've already arranged it at the registry office. You don't have to wait a month. We'll get married out of turn." The bride was dumbfounded, looked at the records and shook her head. "Scott, it's a cosmic sum. I even confused in the zeros. But why all this? Who and what to prove? I hate pomp and circumstance. Let's sign modestly and go traveling, especially if I have a holiday coming up. But why would I want to do that? Expensive dresses. I'll wear it once in my life, and then it'll just sit in my wardrobe. I'll make myself an outfit just the way I want it. I just need to buy a nice fabric. And traveling is new emotions and impressions." Caroline continued, "We'll remember it for the rest of our lives. Especially I have hardly been anywhere. I want to see new cities in the world in general. But for some reason you are in such a hurry. We've already planned everything and applied. We'll wait a month like everyone else. I'll be done with my wedding dress by then. We have our whole lives ahead of us." But Scott started kissing her hotly and whispering, "I can't wait. I'm crazy about you, my little star. You're right, there's no need to spend too much money. We'll do what you say. We'll get married. And then I'll take you to the most beautiful place in the world and make you the happiest." Caroline melted in the hands of her beloved, and it seemed that only joy and happiness were ahead of her. For now they were together forever. Scott really arranged everything, and he and Caroline signed a couple of days later without a beautiful dress. Only rings bought. For the first wedding night, the man rented a suite in an expensive hotel. He was very tender, very affectionate. They loved each other, lounged in bed, and made plans for further happy life. And they were preparing for the wedding trip. The husband showed his wife beautiful pictures from resorts and eagerly told how they will have a good holiday. So far, they lived in Caroline's rented flat. This confused her. She thought that after the wedding they would live in Scott's mansion, but he explained it to her. "Mom and I thought it would be a surprise, but we're a little behind. The renovations are almost finished. We were going to have a big bedroom with a huge bed, a window overlooking the garden and a balcony. We'll move in soon." All Caroline had to do before she left was go to a notary and get a will. She had hoped that her husband would drive her, but he had an important meeting at work, so she took the bus. During rush hour, the bus was jammed. The conductor managed to squeeze through the crowd and punch tickets. Her face was red and angry. There was a boy of about 10 years old, an ordinary teenager in a tracksuit, sneakers, and a cap. When it was his turn to pay, the boy began to dig hard in his many pockets, sniffled, and began to babble. Now, where's the money? Did he lose it? The conductor began to lose patience and shouted, "So, smart guy, don't play comedy with me here. I know you hares, it's always the same, either pay or get off. At the next stop on the control line, your parents will get a ticket." The kid's embarrassed. People looked at him judgmentally. Many people supported the conductor, saying that young people were getting used to traveling without paying for their tickets. For some reason, Carolina felt so sorry for the poor man. She gave some change to the conductor. "I'll pay for him. Let him go. Don't push the boy. He's just a kid. Maybe he really dropped the money somewhere. Things happen." The woman punched the ticket and walked away. The boy looked at his savior with such gratitude. "Thank you very much, Auntie. I lost the money. I don't know where it is. My name's Kevin. I just got in a fight with my stepmom. I'm upset. She wants to take my dad's flat and kick me out. I've got nowhere to go. She's mean. I don't like her." Caroline was shocked by this revelation. She started to ask her questions quietly. "I'm Caroline. You've had a rough life. But how can it be? Does your father agree with it? Why does he allow it?" The boy blushed even more and answered, "My daddy is in prison. But you don't think he didn't do anything wrong. Daddy used to work for a company, and then he got cheated. The money went missing, and everyone thought he was the one. I stayed with my stepmom. I'm so worried about Daddy, I miss him, and I don't know what to do." Caroline shook her head. She had to get off at the next stop. She said, "I feel for you, Kevin, and I wish Daddy would be released soon. Have a good day. I've got to run." The kid said goodbye. "I live at 10 Oak Street in a 5-story building. 3rd floor, flat 40. If you need anything, come and visit me, Aunt Caroline, and have a good day." The girl came to the notary under the impression of dialogue with the boy. She kept thinking about his difficult fate. She was received by a nice young middle-aged man. He began to read out the will. The girl signed all the documents, talked a little, and wanted to leave, when she saw a framed photo on the notary's desk. From there, the same boy Kevin was looking at her. The girl exclaimed, "Excuse me, is this your son, Kevin? What a liar. He said his father was in prison and his stepmother was abusing him. But I believed him. I paid for his ticket. Why don't you give your son a fare? He almost got kicked off the bus by the conductor." Nicholas began to explain. "Okay, stop. That's my son in the photo, but his name is Alex. You must be mistaken. I don't know what this is about at all." Caroline told Nicholas what had happened on the bus, and at the end added, "I don't know how to explain it, but he looks like 2 drops of water like your son, like his twin brother. Well, I'm sorry, maybe I'm confused. Goodbye and goodbye." Caroline held the will in her hands. She was in a good mood, so she decided to surprise her husband and visit him, to see just the mansion they would soon be living in, to talk to her mother-in-law. She remembered the address. Scott had mentioned it once. She was amazed by the house, almost 3 floors, 2 balconies, a huge territory. Caroline even caught fire. "When am I really going to live here soon? What luck. What a beauty. It is true that there's no sign of renovation. But I don't know, maybe it's interior decoration. My favorite is preparing such a surprise." Caroline rang the doorbell. She was opened by a man in uniform, apparently a security guard. The girl said proudly, "Good afternoon. I'm Scott's wife. Let me through." But the man frowned and pushed her away. "Scott who?" "This is the home of a respectable man, Mr. Benjamin. He and his wife and his children live here." "And there's no Scott. You're confused. Citizen." Caroline apologized and left. She couldn't figure it out. How could it be? The cattle said 27th Avenue, opposite the Green Supermarket. It's just like that. And the house is just as he described it. Could it be that I was listening inattentively and got the address wrong? Then the girl automatically began to search the internet for her husband's company. He said it was called Onyx. She found its address and immediately rushed there. But there was a bump in the road. It was some warehouse's hangars. Nobody around. A terrible guess even struck her head. What if Aunt Molly's right and Scott's been lying to her all this time? The girl felt sick to her stomach. But why? What would be the point of Scott leading her around by the nose? Although now Caroline began to compare everything and looked at everything completely differently. Why had Scott insisted and even accelerated the wedding after he'd found out about her inheritance? After all, they were only planning to get married a month later. And why hadn't he ever invited her to his house? He made up some excuse. Is that normal? Caroline cried. She immediately dialed her husband's number. What's going on, honey? I've been to your house, but it's not yours. Now, I'm wandering around the warehouses. I'm trying to find your firm, but it's gone. I'm beginning to think you're a liar. Explain everything to me at once. I got the will. I wanted to surprise you, but I see you've already surprised me so much. I can't get over it. Who are you, Scott? Who did I marry? Maybe you're not even a Henderson. Surprisingly, Scott laughed. He answered calmly. What the hell are you thinking, my favorite detective? I can hear your voice shaking. You're about to cry. You've got it all wrong, Caroline. Where are you now? I'll come and get you, and I'll show you everything. But don't make up things that aren't true. Stay where you are. I'll be right there. The girl's heart was relieved. She wiped away her tears and exhaled a sigh of relief. There, I always get it all mixed up. Scott loves me and wasn't lying at all. Now he'll come and show me both his house and his work. The husband did indeed come very quickly, put Caroline in the car, bent down to kiss her. Suddenly she felt a prick and a chill in her neck. That was it, the light began to fade in her eyes. To Nicholas Kolasov's working day had long since come to an end, and the client who had told him that she had seen a boy who looked like 2 drops of water, like his own son, was still in his mind. The man drank his coffee and thought. So Alex has a twin brother. But how can that be? The orphanage didn't tell me anything about it. I looked at his papers. What am I going to do? No, I have to go to the address Caroline gave me. At least I remembered it, so I can see for myself. Maybe the girls got it all wrong and the kids are only remotely alike. Until I see them for myself, I won't believe it. Nicholas easily found the right address and rang the doorbell, not knowing what he was going to say. But when the door was opened by a boy who looked like his son, he was shocked and said hello. Hi, are you Kevin? Aunt Caroline told me about you. Did you meet her on the bus? My name is Uncle Nicholas. Can I come in? Are your parents home? I need to talk to them. The boy let the guest in and began to fuss about in a very mature way. In the kitchen, he put the kettle on the cooker, took some biscuits out of the box and spoke. I'm alone for now, without adults. My stepmother's gone to the shop and my dad's in prison. But he's not guilty of anything, and my stepmother hates me and wants to send me to an orphanage. She says that's where I belong, and I don't want to go there. I don't want to run away from home. I'm so fed up with everything. Nobody cares about me. I asked Aunt Caroline to help me, but she never came. Maybe that's why she sent you to help me. I don't know why I didn't realize. Nicholas was embarrassed, but he did not dare to say that he came for a completely different matter. Too, he saw the pleading in the child's eyes and began to ask, What's your daddy's name and why was he in jail? Tell me everything you know so that I can find out more about him. Where's your mom and why does your stepmother live here? If it's your dad's flat, your stepmom can't do anything with it. I'm telling you as a notary. The boy was eager to talk. Daddy's name is Terrence Brown, and he worked at Optima. It's not far from here. It's a big building with a clock on it. Money went missing and Dad was accused of fraud and went to prison. He came home crying and said he hadn't taken a penny. Or someone had falsified the report on purpose. And Mom? I don't remember. I've always lived here with my dad and stepmom. I asked my dad about my mom a lot, but he just said she was gone once, that's all. So my stepmom always disliked me, I could feel it. When Dad was around, she was just pretending. And when he was at work, she'd yell at me. She'd call me bad and lock me in my room. I complained to Daddy, but he probably didn't believe me. Because when he's home, Sharon's different. She smiles lusciously, calls me Kevin. And when my dad went to prison, my stepmom got mad at me. But I'm not a little kid anymore. I don't let her hurt me either. We fight all the time. She keeps saying she's going to put me in an orphanage. Nicholas replied, I'll be honest, Kevin, I'm not promising anything, but I'll try to figure things out and help you. But that's why I'm here. Tell me, have you never had a brother? The boy was surprised. No, I don't have a brother, but that's a pity. I'd be glad to have one. We'd be friends then, I'd love him. Nicholas took a picture of his son out of his wallet and showed it to the boy. This is my son Alex. I adopted him, took him from an orphanage when he was very young. Look how much you two look alike. It's unbelievable. So I thought I'd come and see you and find out. Kevin was so excited and offered. Wow, it's like a film. Is there any way to verify it? I saw a film recently where they did a genetic test to find out if a mother's daughter is her own. Here, hold my hair, they did that in the film, and check it out. I'd be very happy if I had a brother. That's so great. Just then the front door opened and Kevin's stepmother walked in. The boy turned pale and fidgeted, but Nicholas understood him without words, gestured him to be quiet, and went out into the hallway. He saw a statuesque, spectacular brunette with impressive forms. She took off her high-heeled shoes and asked in surprise, Kevin, we have guests, why don't you say something? My name is Sharon. And who are you and what is your business? The visitor introduced himself. My name is Nicholas Hills. I'm a notary by trade. And your husband, Terrence, is a childhood friend of mine. I thought I'd pay him a visit, and here I am. Kevin told me all about it briefly. Sharon's eyes lit up. She immediately started hovering round the guest. She offered him lunch, insinuated that her husband was the last thief, and that he wouldn't be released for a long time. She was suffering from loneliness. Nicholas was disgusted to hear such things. How could it be? When a strange man came to the house, and the wife behind her husband's back is already ready to have an affair. This woman was so unpleasant to him. The man replied sharply, I'll try to help Terrence as a friend. I'm also married, have a son, and value my family very much. I'll go. Have a nice day. Nicholas returned home in total confusion. His son Alex ran out to meet him. Once again, a stab in the heart. The boy was happy to see his father talking about his success at school. And Nicholas thought, my son is growing up with me in love and care, and my wife doesn't like him either. And he tells me that a lot. What about me? I'm just like Kevin's dad, I just brush it off. What if my Chris is hurting my son too? I don't see it yet, and Kevin needs to be helped. The kid's trying to reach out to adults, telling strangers about his troubles, and no one can hear him. What if he really is Alex's sibling? It's just questions and mysteries, and no answers yet. Nicholas ate the fried potatoes and onions his son had prepared and asked, Why are you alone? Where's Mum? Didn't she cook dinner? Where's she gone? The child said, Mum got dressed up this morning and left. She said she was going to a birthday party with friends and would be late. And I wanted to go with her, but she got angry and told me to stay home. Daddy, tell me, why is Mummy like that? She doesn't like you and me at all. She's always nagging, always going away. She never asks how I'm doing. I'm so hurt. And you, I'm not a little kid anymore. Dad, I can see everything. Mum must have another man. She's changed so much. She doesn't need us anymore. I can hear you two fighting. To be honest, I wish she'd never come back. Nicholas was shocked by his son's words. He tried his best to calm him down, even though he realized that the child had said out loud what he himself had been thinking for a long time. He and his wife had long been at odds. They lived out of habit, as if they were strangers. There were no children in common, and Nicholas persuaded his wife to take a child from the orphanage. Chris, stubborn to the last, but still agreed. But in fact, she did not want children. All she was interested in was the salons, the shops, sleeping till lunchtime and loving herself. And she didn't want to disrupt her comfortable life. So when little Alex came into their family, it was a real torture for Chris. She didn't want to get up to the baby at night and spend all her time with him. Nicholas so hoped that the child would strengthen their family, but it turned out differently. Now all the worries about his son fell on his shoulders, and his wife only ran away, and they were estranged. Only to hear how she resented that the room is a mess, that Alex grows irresponsible, lazy, that does not obey. But it wasn't exactly like that. Alex obeyed only Daddy, loved him with all his heart. He loved Chris too, when he was little, reaching out to her. But he kept running into coldness on her part and gradually realized that his mom didn't love him. And trying to attract attention to himself, did everything to spite her. The situation had become very heated lately. Nicholas also understood. Chris is clearly attracted to someone, but now she's rarely home. She stopped cooking altogether. They slept apart. It couldn't be called a normal family. But the man still did not dare to have a serious conversation with his wife in divorce. He thought that Alex wouldn't understand what it would be like without his mom. But now, when the son voiced it, Nicholas decided to act. He himself was already unbearable to be at home, and his wife caused irritation. He could not sleep for a long time. His thoughts were confused. Then he thought about how to separate from Chris, then again thought about Kevin. His wife showed up almost mid-morning drunk. She reeked of men's perfume. She'd obviously been having fun with her lover. She, of course, saw Nicholas in the kitchen, but indifferently passed by, staggered to the bathroom. And the husband was suddenly so angry. He grabbed her hand and whispered, "I do not even ask where and with whom you were. It's written all over your face. You don't want a family and you don't want a son, so I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. And I can't go on living like this. Look at you, what you look like, a woman of easy behavior. Disgraceful. Don't you hate it?" Chris fixed her tangled hair, not at all embarrassed, and answered indifferently, "And Alex is not my son to worry about. You're the one who brought him home. Raise him yourself. I am young and beautiful, I have a lot of admirers, and I will not be lost. I haven't loved you for a long time, Nicholas. Divorce? That's fine, it's better that way. I can't stand to see that boy anymore. He disgusts me, he's a stranger to me. I'll leave tomorrow and I'll keep the flat in the center. I have every right." Nicholas was even relieved when he and Chris parted. Alex was cheerful too. Nicholas told him about Kevin and his misfortune. He and his son took the material for examination and eagerly awaited the result. Nicholas also applied for Terrence's parole, asked for a review of his case. There really were a lot of inconsistencies. It was very badly cooked up. Nicholas and his son decided to visit Kevin, but because of his stepmother did not come to his home, but instead invited him to his home. The boys immediately became friends and got along. They are the same age, common interests and hobbies. Now they were thick as thieves. Kevin felt so comfortable and relaxed at Nicholas's house. He thanked him often. "And thank you for everything. Why are you trying to save Daddy for taking me in? I have real friends now. And I just don't understand where Aunt Caroline has disappeared to. Do you know what happened to her?" Nicholas wondered. For all this whirlwind of events, he completely forgot about Caroline and decided to find out everything about her. She didn't answer the phone. This alarmed the man. Through an acquaintance in the police, he found out where Caroline lived and worked. But the landlady of the rented flat said angrily, "I'm outraged. The apartment is gone. She has not taken her things. She has not paid for the month. It's an outrage. I don't know what to do. A new tenant is moving in tomorrow. Where am I supposed to put that girl's stuff? Why don't you take it and tell her it's irresponsible?" Nicholas sorted everything out, took Caroline's things back to his place, paid his debt, but he was even more worried. And when he arrived at the sewing shop, his suspicions only increased. The foreman was surprised. "We don't understand anything ourselves. Caroline is always so responsible, never failed. Her holiday is long over and she's still not at work. Of course, according to the law, I should have fired her a long time ago. But, I'd hate to lose someone like her. It's not like her to be a habitual truant. Besides, she just got married. I hope she'll call me back any day now and explain everything." And Molly said, "You should check out her bloke, for all he's worth. He's a dark man, he's no good. No matter how much we told Caroline not to marry him, she didn't want to. She fell in love with him. A naive girl, she didn't want to notice anything. Find out who Scott Henderson is, what kind of business he's in. I'm sure he had something to do with our Caroline's disappearance. We're very worried about her. She's never missed a day of work. She couldn't just not show up for work like that. She's in trouble. We were thinking of going to the police. We can't sort this out on our own." Nicholas also decided to go to an investigator he knew and convinced him to come look for the girl. The police took a statement and started looking for her. First of all, The notary decided to go with the police to the inherited house. Maybe the girl was there. The place was really picturesque, a riot of greenery and the smell of herbs. The wind was free. Nicholas and the policeman cautiously walked round the house. It was obvious that no one had lived there for a long time. The fence had swayed, all the tall grass was overgrown. There was a lock on the door, and suddenly the policeman said, "The lock, like the door, hasn't been opened long ago. The hinges are greased, but underneath there's rust on the board. Look, and the grass on the doorstep is crumpled. I say we tear it down and check what's inside." Since we've come this far, we did it. The men went inside and immediately heard a faint mooing. They rushed into the small bedroom and gasped. Caroline was lying on the bed with a gag in her mouth. Her arms and legs were tied with ropes, and it was painful to look at her. Her eyes were cloudy. She tried to get up and was desperately shaking her head. Nicholas carefully removed the gag and brought a bottle of water to her lips. Caroline drank long and greedily. After catching her breath, she began to talk. "Nicholas, thank you for finding me. I had no hope of being rescued. It's my husband, the bastard, and my mother-in-law. Because of the inheritance, he injected me with something and brought me here. At first, he just persuaded me to sell the house and the land. He said he needed the money urgently. He begged and pleaded, but when I flatly refused, he and his mother tied me up and scared me that I'd die that way if I didn't come to my senses. They bring me water and food every few days, let me wash up, walk a bit, and then leave me here again. Scott's got the will. I don't know where he put it. I was so scared I only realized who I'd married. He's a con man, his company's a fake, and he doesn't live in that house he kept telling me about. I don't know who he really is. Please save me from him. I'm a mess. I don't want to die, and I won't sell my grandfather's house either. What's in it for me? I love Scott so much. How can I trust anyone now?" The girl cried on Nicholas's shoulder, and he felt something inside him. At that moment, he stroked her shoulders like a little girl and said, all right, don't cry. All the bad things are over. Let's go to my place for now. I've already taken your things from the landlady. She wanted to throw them away. You'll stay with me while the investigation is going on. Don't worry, your husband can't do anything to the house without your consent. I hope you're not going to put up with him after all this." Caroline pressed her palms to her temples. "So what happens to me when I see him? You can't imagine how he has turned from a loving man into an indifferent cynic. I beg him, let him go. And he has ice in his eyes. I was the fool who loved him, and he didn't love me at all, but I realized it too late." Caroline gave a statement to the police. Then they removed the ligature marks and let the poor girl go. When Nicholas carried her home in his arms, the boys were stunned. Kevin sobbed. "Aunt Caroline, what's the matter with you?" "Who did this to you?" Alex asked. "Uncle Nicholas, what happened?" Kevin asked. The man commanded. "Guys, all questions later. You can see she's not well. Alex, run and fill the bathroom with hot water. Kevin, you put the kettle on and heat up something to eat. Get a towel and my bathrobe. We'll all work together to heal, to save Caroline. We're a team." Caroline soaked in the hot bath with pleasure, then drank hot sweet tea with sandwiches, listened to the boys chatter. She couldn't even wonder why the kids were together now. Her eyes closed on their own. She was safe at last. The police are looking for a villain, and there is a real man around, her savior Nicholas. The girl fell asleep as soon as her head touched the pillow. She slept for almost 24 hours. She awoke to a cool hand on her forehead. "Aunt Caroline, it's me, Kevin. How did you sleep so long? Shouldn't we call a doctor? Do you have a fever? No, I think it's fine. You're not feeling well?" The girl smiled. She was moved to tears by such concern. Alex also stood in the doorway, looking concerned. Caroline stretched, sat up, and suddenly hugged the boy. "Everything will be all right now. I'm so glad to see you. Alex, come on. Introduce me to your brother. You're definitely twins. You live here now? What happened? Tell me." The boys went on and on about all the recent events and how Nicholas was trying to get Kevin's dad out of jail and that they were best friends now. Then Kevin sadly remarked, "Like you could say I'm living in Uncle Nicholas's house. I can't go home, and my stepmother is happy to have me. I'm just a nuisance to her at home. I can't wait for Daddy to get out. I miss him so much. Now I have a little brother, we're a family. Uncle Nicholas had a genetic test done. It says Alex and I are the closest thing to family. That's really great. Are you going to live here now too? That's great. How do you make pizza? We bought some tinned pineapple and sausage. We thought we'd give it a try. Carolina replied with a smile. I know how to do everything. We'll bake a pizza, make some soup and compe. We have to give Alex's new dad a nice dinner. It's a thank you for everything. Nicholas was so tired during the day, he had a lot of customers. Then he went to the police to find out what was new about Caroline and Terrence. She came home tired to the utmost and thought sadly that he would have to stand at the cooker. After all, the boys must have been on dry food all day. But what was his surprise when he saw a generously laid table? The smell was mind-blowing. Caroline simply said, "Hello, Nicholas. You wash your hands and come to the table. The boys and I have worked very hard. I hope you enjoy it." The man devoured the treats with both cheeks. He'd forgotten what family dinners were like, and the flat had been transformed. You can see a woman's hand at work. Everything's in place, clean, and even Alex's room is tidy. But you surprised me. Caroline, how did you manage to teach the boys order? It's my pleasure, Nicholas exclaimed. The girl laughed. Yes, we became friends. Tomorrow I go to work. I've already phoned my boss. Thank him. He was cool about it, didn't fire me. I'm thinking we should all go rollerblading in the park this weekend. Turns out Alex and Kevin can do that. I've been wanting to learn for ages. What do you think? Nicholas immediately agreed. I support it. It's been so long since we've been out, but I've never roller skated, and with my height I'll look like a circus bear. That's okay. We'll have a good laugh. The week flew by like a day. Nicholas drove Caroline to work and picked her up, never leaving her for a minute. He took such touching care of her. It even seemed like she was married to him, not Scott. They were so good together. Soon Caroline was called to the police. The scoundrel husband and his mother were caught. It turned out they were professional scammers, and they had more than one woman who had been defrauded. They were looking for any way to get rich, and they weren't related at all. They were just colluding in the same scheme. But things didn't go according to plan with Caroline. She wasn't rich at all, and at first Scott just had fun with her out of boredom. He liked to show off. It was second nature to him. He even thought he was in love. He really liked Caroline, but when he learned about the inheritance, he immediately remembered what he had to do. That's why he was in a hurry to get married, so that it would be easier to take possession of the plot and sell it. The beloved will be stubborn, and so it was. Caroline, despite the fear and horror, did not agree to sell the house, and Scott's accomplice offered to get rid of her. That's what he said at the confrontation. And Mrs. Scarlett pressured me to kidnap Caroline. She had no relatives, no one to look for her, and the countryside was wild, with few inhabitants. If the body was left in the thicket, the wild beasts would do the deed themselves, and the end would be in the water. But I couldn't. I didn't want to kill her, so I kept dragging it out. I kept coming, feeding Caroline, trying to get her to agree to sell the damn property. I really wanted to be done with all this black business. I thought I'd stop, settle down. It's all Mrs. Scarlett's fault. She made me do it. I had nothing to do with it. Caroline, astonished at her ex-husband's insolence and cynicism, screamed in his face. How could you? You lied to me from the first minute, and about my mother, and about work, and about the house. All lies. I hate you. You hear me? I think we'll be divorced in no time. Get out of my life forever. The criminals went to prison for a long time, as they should have. There was a trail of dark deeds behind them. There were other victims of the deceivers. Angry women demanded the return of huge sums of money or property that Scott and his pseudo-mother had swindled out of them. Caroline didn't want to leave Nicholas, but she didn't feel comfortable staying with him. So one night at dinner, she decided to have a conversation. Nicholas, guys, I wanted to talk to you. I'm not in danger anymore, and I'm really worried that I'm still living with you. Maybe I'm embarrassing you. Maybe it's time for me to get a flat. The boys jumped right up to her. They were so funny, so angular, so worried, and they tucked themselves into the hem of her dressing gown. No, Aunt Caroline, we'll never let you go. You're like our mom. You're so kind, and you cook so good. And you're the best. Carolina wept. She was very pleased with such words. She moved her eyes to Nicholas, and he also answered. Stay, Caroline, please. With your arrival, we became a family again, a friendly, real family. Why ruin everything? What if everything works out? Fate brought us together for a reason. Only Caroline seemed to breathe a sigh of relief that all the troubles were over. And then, once again, trouble came from nowhere. Nicholas received a phone call from an investigator he knew, informing him that there had been a fire in the colony where Terrence was imprisoned. A lot of people were hurt. Terrence is now in intensive care. The prognosis is very bad. They didn't tell Kevin anything at first. They hoped for a miracle and Terrence would survive, but no. A couple of days later, they told him he died. So Kevin decided not to hide the truth, but the conversation was very difficult. Nicholas struggled to find the right words. Caroline held the boy's hand. We have some very bad news. Your daddy died in prison. He's gone. I know it's a terrible thing to lose a father. It'll make it easier if you cry. And know that we'll be here for you. Kevin didn't shed a tear, but he looked at Caroline and Nicholas in a strange way and asked in an adult way. What's going to happen to me now? I'll be taken to an orphanage now, won't I? Uncle Nicholas, help me, please take me in. I promise I'll obey. My stepmother doesn't want me, she'll put me in an orphanage. Hide me in your house. Once again, Nicholas didn't lie to the boy. Come here, Kevin, look me in the eyes and remember, you are Alex's brother, so you are not a stranger to me. Do you understand? You can't hide. We have to get a guardianship to make it legal. We'll give your daddy a proper burial. I'll help. Then I'll deal with your stepmom, and we'll go together to find out about custody. We have the results of the evaluation. I think they'll be very accommodating. It's not a quick process, but we have to be patient. Do you believe me? Tell me it's important that you believe me, Kevin. The boy couldn't stand it and cried, hugged Nicholas and whispered, I believe you, Uncle Nicholas. Thank you. If it wasn't for you, I would have run away from home, wandering somewhere. I want to live with you and my brother, with Aunt Caroline. I'm fine with you. Just don't leave me, okay? I'm really scared. And I feel sorry for my dad. I can't believe he's gone. Terrence was given a final farewell. They ordered a memorial service and a wake. Kevin was crying, holding his father's things to his heart. He immediately put his watch on his hand and wore it from that day on as a memento. Nicholas won custody, though it wasn't easy. He and Caroline had to sign, so the boys grew up in a complete family, lived together, did not quarrel. Caroline managed her men well. They cherished and pitied her. They cared for her touchingly. Years passed. The boys turned 16. There is now a little sister growing up in the family. Caroline and Nicholas shared child, the adorable Annie. It was the boys' birthday. Their parents bought them each a new phone of the latest model, and in the midst of the celebration, Nicholas raised a toast. Nicholas made a toast. My favorite son's my pride. I love you very much and I want your fondest dreams to come true today. Tell me, what are your dreams? This is very important to me. Kevin boldly said, Thank you, Dad, for your kind words and for the presents. Alex and I have one dream. We don't know how you and Mom will feel about it. I want to know who my mom is, where she is, why she left me. Alex would also like to know something about his biological parents. Is that okay with you? We love you and we're grateful for everything. It's just that everyone has a right to know their roots. Caroline even turned pale, her spouse coughed, but he answered, I respect your opinion, guys, though I don't entirely agree with it, and I suggest we go to an agency. We'll go tomorrow. Maybe they can find out all about your biological parents. But I warn you, sometimes the truth can be very painful. But you're adults. You have to be able to take any news with dignity. The detectives did their job, and it took them a month to find out. And here's what they found out. An elderly grandmother, a neighbor from Kevin's house, helped. The woman knew the family intimately, more than one generation. She told the story of their family. Terrence, Alex and Kevin's father, had dated a girl from a dysfunctional family when he was young. Her name was Gwen. The parents of the guy were strongly opposed to this connection and tried in every possible way to break up the young. And Terrence himself soon realized that the bride is fickle. She often changed suitors. for a long time did not meet with anyone. But soon after their separation, Gwen showed up at the flat to Terrence's parents and said that she was pregnant. Naturally, she did not believe her and kicked out. That's all the old lady remembers. And then, when Terrence was already married to Sharon, he suddenly began to walk with a little boy. Many neighbors were saying that no one had ever seen Sharon pregnant, and the baby was no longer a baby. But Terrence put a stop to any talk and just said, "This is my son Kevin. If anyone says a bad word, he'll have to deal with me." And so they moved on with their lives. The neighbors gossiped and then stopped. They got used to it. Kevin grew up a good boy, kind open. No one in the yard ever hurt him. Detectives followed the trail and began to learn about the fate of the same Gwen, who was pregnant and missing. And here's what they found out. The girl really got pregnant from a casual acquaintance. To avoid disgrace, hurriedly went to the village. There and gave birth to twins, living with an old grandmother. But she did not become a good mom to children. She started going out again, disappearing at night. She left her children to her elderly and sick grandmother. The grandmother couldn't stand it and gave her a condition. Take the kids and go to your parents in the city. The boys were about a year old, but the absent-minded mother was not going to raise the children and take care of them. Alex was strong, ate and slept well. But Kevin was born weak, shouted all the time, ate very badly, did not gain weight. Gwen decided to drop Alex off at the orphanage, but she took pity on Kevin. She brought him to Terrence at work and ran off on her own. Terrence turned out to be a decent man, raising a son. Loved him and didn't even realize he had a twin brother. And Alex was adopted by Nicholas when he was a year old. The orphanage also did not know that the abandoned boy has a brother. Gwen herself fate severely punished for such a terrible act, she fell to the bottom, began to use drugs and died in some brothel from an overdose. If it hadn't been for that chance meeting between Caroline and Kevin on the bus, which started it all, the brothers, who were blood brothers, would probably never have known of each other's existence. The boys listened to all of this with bated breath. They thought for a long time, were silent, and then suddenly came up to Caroline and said, "You are the most real, the most beloved and dear. Our mom is the woman who gave birth to us and left us so cynically. She's nothing to us, a stranger. Only you are our real mom. You loved us, treated us when we were sick, patiently endured our antics, taught us wisdom and reason. Thank you. My brother and I are proud of our family." Caroline cried, wiping her tears with her handkerchief. These sincere words touched her soul. She hugged her already so grown-up sons and whispered, You are good favorite boys. I love you as my relatives. No, you are my relatives. Soon you'll be grown up and married. You'll be out of the nest. I want you to know that no matter how your life turns out, your mom will always love and wait for you." All these years, the family every summer went not to the fancy seaside resorts, and in the village to rest in the same grandfather's cottage. Nicholas and the boys disappeared on the lake, fishing. His wife and daughter went to the forest for mushrooms and berries. Then they cooked soup, warmed themselves on cool nights near the stove. There was some kind of special romance in it. They didn't change anything here on purpose, just made some cosmetic repairs. Caroline wanted the house to still have the atmosphere of her new childhood. She reverently looked through her grandfather's old things in the shed and with tears in her eyes remembered how she and her grandfather used to tie knots and catch fish, and how she used to fry these very same raisias until they were golden in sour cream. And her grandfather praised her, stroking her head affectionately. These memories made my heart ache. Caroline shared with her husband details of her childhood, remembered her grandparents. She looked through old black and white photos and, clinging tighter to her beloved husband, he smiled and said, "You are so beautiful now. In your eyes I see a little girl. It's so amazing. I'm glad that we managed to defend and preserve this little corner of your childhood, your soul, realizing how precious it is for you. The places here are really wonderful, and the house is such an atmosphere of peace and kindness. I myself come back from holiday full of energy, and the children only benefit from the fresh air." At such moments, Caroline felt most keenly how happy she was with Nicholas. It was he who became her support in life, gave her a family, the happiness of becoming a mom. Earlier, when she was a teenager, dreamed of finding out where her mom had disappeared, how she could forget her, cut her out of her life. But after the story of her sons, Caroline realized she didn't want to know. She always warmly remembered her grandfather and grandmother, who replaced both her father and mother. She tried not to think about the woman who gave birth to her and abandoned her. Colleagues and acquaintances were happy for her and believed that her acquaintance with Nicholas was not just an accident, but fate. The boys' tangled history was almost a detective story to them. Little Annie was a copy of Nicholas. He loved his daughter very much. He never let her down and spoiled her, and thought that he was incredibly lucky to meet such a wise, kind, loving woman like Caroline. And even though they'd been through a lot of hardships, and raising 3 children is not easy, the main thing is that they overcame all the difficulties together, hand in hand, and knew that no matter what happened, family is the main thing in life and a huge incentive for new achievements. From the window of the hospital room, I could see the chimneys of the factory, which had been raining for a week. It was gloomy and damp, so even walking around the small green courtyard was no fun. Jason felt like he was slowly dying, and, admittedly, he had reason to think so. He'd been rich and happy until a few months ago. Life had seemed so wonderful, any dream, traveling, buying expensive things without thinking about the price. But all that wasn't enough when illness came into his life. Continuing research, the doctor divorced his hands at every question of his wealthy patient Jason Beepry. Endless procedures, tests, visits to specialists. Jason was so tired of it all. Given that it wasn't producing any results, his strength was diminishing. He was having unbearable headaches, and he had to fight insomnia with sedatives. He was fading from day to day. At first, his only joy was his wife. He waited for her arrival every day, got out of bed and looked out the window, as long as he had the strength to stand. Of course, he was well cared for, ready to come at the first call, and the ward was more like a room in an expensive hotel. But still, there is nothing more precious than loved ones. It was only when he was sick that Jason realized that his wife was the only one who could visit him, not because of money, connections, or business, but because she cared about him. But for some reason, she came less and less often, and the meetings grew shorter, more silent. Annie would sit by his bedside for about 20 minutes, as if it were a heavy duty rather than the desire of a loving wife, and then she would leave on some pretext. Paul says I need brain surgery, but the outcome is 50-50, Jason sadly shared in one of their brief encounters. Oh well, we have to try. After all, Paul isn't just any doctor. He's been in the clinic for 15 years, Annie said affirmatively, looking out the window and thinking about something of her own. I'm afraid of dying, her husband was quite candid. Jason, what are you making up? She asked irritably. But then she came to her senses and said more softly and cheerfully, it's going to be okay, you'll see, touching his arm. Annie got up and started to leave. What, you already? Jason asked. But I just got here, didn't I? Stay a little longer, I've got to go, she replied. I'll come back the other day and stay with you a little longer. The door shut behind her, and outside the window the sun, which had been illuminating the room with golden sunset light all this time, disappeared over the horizon. Twilight was thickening. He felt so sad that Jason cried for the first time in his adult life. He was overcome with fear of dying of illness and the loneliness of those he considered his friends. They had only come once to negotiate the sale of his share of the company. His parents were long gone, and Jennifer had suddenly grown cold to him. But even that coldness wasn't as frightening as her smiles and the satisfied smirk she sometimes allowed herself, forgetting herself. There seemed to be some other life outside this room, some happy place where they were happy. And Jennifer came here as a matter of duty. It would have hurt Jason even more if he'd seen her exhale with relief when she was on the porch of the clinic, waiting hopefully for the car to meet her. All that kept her near her husband these weeks was the huge inheritance she was preparing to receive after his death. It had gotten quite dark, and in the gloom only the red lights of the medical machines and the television could be seen. They could hear people talking in the hallway, and the beams from the headlights of passing cars could be seen on the walls. But Jason was alone, wondering what he had done wrong in his life to die at 32. There was a knock at the door. Then a small female figure appeared in the doorway. An orderly entered the room and brought in her cleaning tools. It's time to go for a walk, she smiled. Can I stay here? I'm not bothering you, Jason said cheerfully. He'd grown fond of these short visits in the last few days, when the older nurse, Darcy Peterson, had gone on sick leave and the positive, red-haired Kathy had taken her place. All right, she agreed. I'll make it quick. You can stay a little longer. I'm all alone in here. Oh, come on, you have so many business people coming to you. Not one patient is not so popular with us. It's all business. Katie's been quick to mop the floor. Take out your flowers. Turn on the TV. That'll make it more fun. And soon Paul Alexandrovich will come to see you, the girl said contentedly. I'm standing at the door with a mop in my hands. You're good, Kathy. Come in and she'll be cheerful at once. How do you do it? I just find something good in everything, she smiled and closed the door carefully behind her. Perhaps no one but Katie had ever been so sincere and straightforward with him, and that made it feel better, if only for a little while, especially since the doctors kept shrugging their shoulders and ordering more tests. And Annie didn't come once a week, and once a week looked into the room, and without taking off her coat, inquired about her husband's health. Not that she listened much to his stories, but he still shared his worries with her. He'd long ago realized that his wife had lost all interest in him, and was talking only out of a sense of duty, or even, that was what Jason was afraid of, pushing the bad thoughts away. Well, his Annie can't be with him only because of the inheritance, not to love him, but hoping he'll get the money soon. Waiting for him to know. That thought he could not endure. Fortunately, his heavy musings were interrupted by Katie's whirlwind, who burst into the room like a fresh breeze on a sweltering day. She was holding a paper bag from the local bakery, and the appetizing aroma of freshly baked goods boded well for Jason. A couple of fresh buns and a sandwich. He'd rarely been able to eat anything really good lately. The hospital food, though prepared for him with care, was far from homemade. "Thank you, Katie," he said sincerely as she helped him up. "Eat up and get well," she winked and placed the table of food on the patient's lap. It was amazing how much of an appetite he suddenly had. Jason thought for a moment that he was sure to get better and get back to business. "Did you go to see him again?" Nurse Irene asked with a chuckle when Katie entered the office. "What's the big deal? And you still don't take any money from him?" "No. What do I need his money for? I'm not doing anything. I'm just being supportive." "Don't worry, you're a lover." "I wouldn't advise it. It's better not to run into his wife." "Sure," incredulously stretched the woman. "Why do you say that?" Katie was indignant. "I'm not going anywhere." Irene had hinted at extra fees for almost all the wealthy patients at their clinic. Jason was no exception. Maybe that was why she found it hard to believe in Katie's sincerity. That same evening, his wife visited him. An expensive black car was waiting for her at the entrance, and she was dressed smartly, as if she were going to a restaurant or the theater. "How are you?" she asked impatiently, going over her gloves in her hands. "You know, not bad," Jason replied in a weak but cheerful voice. "Played a game of chess with one man today. He's in the next room over, and he's going crazy with idleness, too." "Good," she nodded her head. "I've been meaning to ask you. Anyway, I've run out of money in my account. I need to buy a couple things right away. Can you call the bank?" "Okay." After that, Jason, you couldn't tell anything from his facial expression, but his heart dropped. He called his assistant, and after arranging everything, he looked at her. All set. "Can you go?" "Thank you, darling," she replied and left. Left alone, Jason felt the terrible headache again. At his moans, a nurse came running in, followed by Paul seeing a dose of painkillers. They watched him for a few more minutes and left, leaving him alone with his gloomy thoughts. "Kathy, I have a favor to ask of you," Jason addressed the nurse during the morning cleanup. "Excuse me, dear." A smile lit up the girl's face, but the next moment it was immediately gone. "I'm going to die soon, and I just can't help but think about my funeral." No, don't say anything, please. My wife and co-workers will do everything hastily. Or maybe they won't do it at all." "Jason, Dimitri, what on earth are you talking about?" Katie couldn't take it anymore. "What death? What funeral?" "You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're a very good, kind girl. Kathy, I've never met anyone like you in my life. But still, I beg you, go to the funeral home, book, and make the arrangements. Pick out the casket, the wreaths, the clothes. But what else is required there?" He spoke so earnestly that good-natured Kathy could not refuse. Paul had ordered her to leave work early for the afternoon, and her friend Irene was already talking about it. "There she goes again, with all her favors and all her secrets," she told the other nurses. "You'll see we'll have a scandal on the ward over this. Jennifer's not going to be happy." Going to the funeral home was awkward and scary. Katie had never had to choose such items before. She decided she wouldn't take the responsibility, but would take some catalog and let Jason decide on the casket and burial clothes if he wanted to. She walked to the closest bureau to the hospital, stepped around a parked black car, and opened the door with trembling hands. The first thing that caught her eye were the numerous wreaths of artificial branches and flowers hanging on the walls. After running her eyes over them, she looked in surprise at the man and woman talking to the counselor. Annie was standing near the counter. Next to her, a tall young man, dressed smartly in a dark blue jacket, perfectly ironed pants and leather boots. His companion was not far behind. She wore an elegant black dress, a coat, high-heeled shoes, and a shining necklace around her neck. Their faces expressed sorrow and sadness. Katie stepped closer. "Yes. Let's stop there with the roses." The woman pointed her finger at the picture. "We'll write to my beloved husband on the ribbons." At this point, Annie pulled a handkerchief out of her pocket and held it to her eyes. Was she actually crying or wiping away dry eyes? Katie didn't figure it out. Seeing her like that, shocked, she immediately turned around and walked out, circling the brazenly parked car again. She headed home, taking advantage of the unexpected free time she had. They were having a merchandise update right now. They asked her to come back in a week. She lied to Jason all the previous evening. Katie wondered if she should tell him about the funeral home meeting. After all, it was unlikely she had another husband who had passed away unexpectedly. It was more likely that she'd chosen a wreath for Jason with that regretful look on her face. What is this? The wife has already buried her husband in absentia, But the tongue did not turn to tell such a person who lost the will to live. Not only are his loved ones not visiting him, they're preparing to bury him. Annie showed up a couple days later. As always, beautifully dressed in a cloud of exquisite perfume. She walked past Katie without even noticing, or even giving the rich man an attentive glance. What on earth was she up to? Jason spoke a little worriedly at first, but solemnly, as if he had prepared for this speech in advance. I have an idea, and I think you'll like it. What idea? He asked without enthusiasm. Turning his face toward the window and looking at the treetops that retain their golden foliage. The doctors can do nothing. How many treatments have we had? I've lost count. Treatment, no results. So I thought maybe you could go to the country for a while, live in nature, get away from these hospital walls. I'll think about it. Jason turned and looked hopefully at his wife, expecting to see sympathy on her face, but there was none. She smiled coldly, rising from her chair. You don't love me anymore. What nonsense is this? Of course I do, she said with a poorly concealed effort. I'm just tired, Jason, I'm tired. I have to deal with all your clients, your investors, your employees. It's exhausting. A week later, Jason was discharged at their request, and his wife took him to the village where a house had been bought for him. As he watched the trees and fields outside the window, he kept replaying the words he had heard in his head. During his last days at the clinic, Jason Dimitri had told him in a conspiratorial tone. Irene, stopping by for 5 minutes. Apparently to give this information, I heard such a thing today. What is it? He turned grudgingly, preoccupied with his own fate. Jason was planning to agree to the surgery the doctor had insisted on. I overheard your doctors talking today. They agreed not to tell you, of course, but that's cheating. What are you, after all? Jason was angry. You don't have more than 2 weeks to live, Irene poked him resentfully and walked away. That news hit him the hardest. He dismissed all thoughts of the surgery, almost stopped eating, stopped caring for himself. Calling his wife, Jason asked her to come and informed her of his decision to move into the country house, adding to himself, but even those. Jason, why are you doing this? Do you need treatment? Katie was worried when she heard the news of the patient's imminent discharge. There's no need for treatment, Kathy, he answered. I'll be dead soon. What makes you think that? Stay, the nurse urged. Finally, she decided to make one last argument. Do you know why I came back with nothing? When you sent me to the funeral parlor, because I met your wife and a man there, and they were choosing a wreath for you. Well, they're absolutely right. It's about time, Jason said indifferently. What could I do with him? Kathy asked him to take her number so he could call her if he needed help. After he left, Katie couldn't find a place to be. Oh, calm down, Irene told her. When was the last job she didn't have time to clean, and in half the offices assigned to her? Who is he to you to worry so much? There's something wrong with this story, you know? I can't just take it and not think about it. You've got no business of your own. Go to work. Those rich people will sort it out for themselves, Irene said. She's a noble one, isn't she? She doesn't want any money. She's worried sick. I don't understand you. Kathy was upset. She suddenly felt very uncomfortable being around her coworker. And about the money, you took something from them. But you did, Irene replied proudly. It's a sin not to take from someone like that. What's going on in their family? It's none of my business. And you stay out of it, you'll be the least of it. What did you take them for? Katie asked without her former friendly tone. Oh, that's a very funny story, Irene laughed. His wife must have been playing a trick on him and asked me to casually say, You've only got 2 weeks left. You should have seen the look on his face. Are you out of your mind? Katie boiled up, glaring angrily at her former friend. She walked out and slammed the door behind her. How she wished she had asked Jason for his phone number. For 2 weeks she hadn't known where he'd been taken, what was happening to him, or if he was even alive. In the meantime, Jason was settling into his new home. It was an old house with simple furnishings, but cozy and bright. She promised to come every other day, to hire a nurse and a groundskeeper. She disappeared almost immediately. So I had to do it myself. Strangely enough, Jason did feel better. The silence, the coolness of autumn, the vast vistas outside the window, the scent of apples and honey, all of it transported him back to his childhood, to his grandmother's little house where he'd spent his summer vacations. On the other hand, a heavy, painful desire to say goodbye to everything was growing inside. Without wanting to, he did not want to die, especially alone, abandoned by everyone and needed by no one. It was not easy to get up and move. But that was half the trouble. The house was full of unpleasant surprises that could be found anywhere. On the first day, Jason walked into the kitchen and fell into the basement with 1 foot, miraculously not breaking anything. When he got up, he examined the broken piece of flooring and noticed that it had been purposely filed down, repairing the floor. Jason started cooking. He turned on the stove, put a pot on it, and went to lie down to build up his strength for the soup. He couldn't rest, though, because soon a strange odor of burning meat wafted from the kitchen. The portable tank had suddenly sprung a leak. That's the last thing we need. I'll have to buy an electric stove, Jason said to himself, and then he grinned. Just when I'm about to die, there's a stove when he entered the bedroom in the evening. the master sensed something slowly and silently moving on the carpet beside the bed. He came closer to examine the strange creature, but immediately recoiled in fear. On the floor, twisted in a ring, lay a brown snake with a red fanciful pattern. Where would a viper come from in the house? This circumstance absolutely threw him off his guard. The time was late, he was alone, and he knew no one in the village. He didn't know what other traps these rooms held. Overcoming his fear, Jason opened the window, took the heavy cotton blankets left by the previous owners, and threw them at the snake. The snake fell silent, giving him the opportunity to grab it and throw it outside. The rustling of leaves between the trees in the garden made a movement from the window into the thicket. The uninvited guests disappeared into the darkness. Jason lay awake until morning, listening to every rustle. The next day he tossed and turned between wanting to call a cab to town and not wanting to do anything about it. The feeling of hopelessness and lack of energy only made itself felt in the evening, spent from a sick sleep. He was able to get up, wash his face, and organize some sort of dinner for himself. There was no more energy for anything else. He lay down on the couch. Suddenly the ceiling shrieked. From above came sounds like quick, small footsteps. Another night of no sleep, Jason asked aloud. He got to his feet, threw his jacket over his shoulders, and went to find out what wonders the attic had in store for him. However, it was impossible to do so. As he climbed the few wooden steps up, the whole structure collapsed. Jason fell with it, and now he was lying on the dusty floor, not knowing what to grab onto. His head ached from the impact. His leg burned with fire. It was only half an hour later, when the pain subsided, that he was able to crawl to the door and sneak inside. Realizing he couldn't do it alone, Jason dialed his wife's number. Then he dialed several friends, but ironically they were all either unavailable or answered with a series of long beeps. Lying on the floor, Jason stared at the ceiling, wondering how he'd gotten to this point. Scenes of their lavish wedding, to which about 100 guests had been invited, their vacation at the seashore, the purchase of a car, conferences, and business meetings appeared before his eyes. He felt success and good fortune dissolving into thin air as the brilliant future he had planned lost its shape. Who is he now? What does he live for? There was one more number in the phone book that he wanted to call, but something prevented him from doing so. The sun was already out of the window, and dusk was settling in when Jason made up his mind. Katie, hello. You recognize me, of course. How are you? I've been so worried about you. She sounded so warm that he sighed. How nice it would be to see her again right now in this very house. Then all the problems would go to the back of his mind. It's okay. I'm living it up, getting high. It's nice and quiet here, he began cheerfully, except that I fell down the stairs and hurt my leg trying to call someone, and I can't get up. So it's not a fracture, Katie was worried. I don't think so, but it hurts to get up. I'll come over. Is that okay? I'd really appreciate it. Don't apologize. It's my pleasure. The room seemed brighter and cozier after those words. Tomorrow he wouldn't be alone. Tomorrow a girl with shiny red hair and an infectious smile would appear here, break the agonizing silence, dispel the painful atmosphere and the fear of death. Paul Alexander was angry for some reason when Kathy asked him for one of her 4 days off. There's no one to work, and you give a day's notice. That's not how things are done, Catherine. But I really have to. I do have someone I need to help. I understand that, but I can't replace you. I have an important patient coming in tomorrow. Everything has to be perfect, so go to work. Paul Alexander, I've been working 2 years without vacation or time off. Can Darcy Peterson take my place? No vacations at home, no vacations, and some people don't even get a day off. Darcy Peterson can't leave because, again, a solid patient is coming in. I need a young, beautiful staff in the meantime. So a very good person has to suffer because of the whims of your rich patient. Katie couldn't take it anymore. She had never let herself talk to her boss like that before, even though she knew about all his machinations and had been regularly supplied with that knowledge until recently. Something wrong. Write a statement. Calculating accounting indifferently, replied Paul, hoping, apparently, that the threat would have a quick effect. Okay, Katie calmly replied. She was so angry that she actually packed her things and went to write her resignation letter. Having worked honestly at the clinic for so many years, she had never expected to be treated like this. I'll find something better. I have experience. Yes, they would take her to any other institution, she explained to her colleagues. Gathered in the corridor, just sitting on the bus on the way to the village, Katie reprimanded herself for this act. It would take time to find a job, and what would she live on if she lost her only source of income? On the other hand, it felt like a relief. It was like a heavy weight had been lifted off her shoulders. This job, without vacations and sick days, had been wearing her down for a long time. Paul's words were the last straw. A familiar village flew past, and Katie pressed herself against the window to catch a glimpse of the White House behind the trees. Almost at the very edge of the street, it was where she'd spent her childhood. Her heart ached at the memory. She wanted badly for the bus to slow down near the dilapidated red brick bus stop. The doors opened and my mother came in with a full basket of mushrooms and birch branches. from which she would deftly assemble large bath brooms. The family lived poorly, and it was from this very poverty that Katie had gone to the city and entered medical school. But now she would give anything to sit with her mother once more at the table in their small kitchen, drink mint tea, sleep on the stove, and lie down longer in the morning. Listening to the wood crackle on the stove, nostalgic Katie didn't notice when she reached the village where Jason lived. It wasn't hard to find his house. She stepped inside and found him lying on the couch, covered by a thin blanket. The man was dozing on the couch. The room was a mess. The blanket was lying on the floor. There was a plate of food and a mug of tea under the bed. Katie felt sorry for Jason. The whole place was a testament to the fact that he had been sent here to live out his life, forgotten by everyone. Desperate, he didn't look like himself at this minute. "Hello, Katie," Jason cheered, waking up. "Hello, how are you here?" As you can see, he looked around the room with his gaze, although I still feel better here than I did in the hospital by evening. The house, as well as its sole occupant, began to look noticeably better. There were tablecloths on the tables, curtains on the windows, and the kitchen smelled of baked potatoes and vegetables. Jason cheered up. "I miss a proper home-cooked meal," he asked twice for more, leaving him to rest. Katie went in search of the store. Fortunately, it didn't take long to find it. There were people crowded in front of the little blue house with the grocery sign. They all gave the newcomer an attentive stare, obviously trying to understand who she was and who she had come to see. "Oh, what a beautiful girl. Do we have someone's granddaughter?" the clerk asked, pulling out cereal, butter, bread, and other items on the list. "Katie, I'm here to see Jason Dimitri. He lives on the outskirts. Maybe you know him." "You wouldn't know. A new guy doesn't get to know anybody. He doesn't go out too much." "Is it hard for him to go out? Does he get sick?" "Well, yes," nodded a large man at the counter, the chairman of the local cooperative. "So sick that his wife has already prepared a place for him in the cemetery." "What? How could that be?" Katie was surprised. "That's it. We are, as they say, shocked ourselves. Maybe you're confused. Look for yourself." They dug up her grave there. They called someone from the city. From the sales clerk's face, you could understand that this topic causes superstitious fear in the village. That's why few people dared to stop by Jason's house to meet their new neighbor. But how could they? Can it? The man is alive, and they've almost buried him. Maybe all this weirdness isn't an accident. Katie stayed with him for a week, during which time she got to know the villagers. Next door to Jason's cottage lived Granny, small, quiet, and pleasant to talk to. Katie found comfort in talking to her. She reminded her of her grandmother. It was she who had suggested Jason's unconventional treatment. "If medicine can't help, maybe we should try folk remedies," she said, pouring tea. "What do you mean?" Katie wondered. "There's a healer in the neighboring village. I haven't been there myself. I've heard that people even come to her from the city for help." Jason laughed at the idea, and Katie was eager to try it. "It's not like we're losing anything," she urged. "Let's just test it. Was she really helping, or was it all just talk?" 2 days later, they were on an old, cramped bus that traveled between villages twice a day. They had 3 hours to find the mysterious healer. Otherwise, they wouldn't make it home in time. Wandering the streets and asking locals, Jason and Katie finally reached her. The woman in the place did stand in the distance and greeted her guests unfriendly with tiny dark windows and a drooping wicket. Katie felt uneasy. She was beginning to regret the decision to come here. Jason treated it with the same irony, smiling and joking. It was hard to walk, though, and he was tempted to lie down. There was a light in the window, and footsteps were heard. The door opened, and a woman of about 50 short, in a brown long dress and a light shawl, from under which her black hair was poking out, came out. She spoke quietly, slowly, as if thinking over every word. When she learned the purpose of the visit, she invited the guests into the house. The wooden floor creaked with every step. Light fell from a large window. There were many potted flowers on the windowsill, and a cat sleeping peacefully on the ropes stretched from one wall to another. Collected brooms of herbs were drying. It smelled of chamomile and wormwood. Katie shuddered as something big, sad, and shaggy came out from behind the stove. It sighed and snorted. "Don't be afraid, that's my dog Baron. He is quite old now. He won't bite," said the landlady. The dog Baron lazily looked at the people who came into the house and made a muffled sound resembling barking, spreading his paws wide and walked towards the exit. Once he was outside, the owner invited Jason and Katie to sit down. Just like that, no one knows what it could be. "The only thing that saves us is painkillers," Catherine finished her story. Without knowing the backstory, you'd think that Annie, Jason's wife, was so worried about him. "Well, can I try?" Barbara spoke up after some silence. "We'll probably go," Jason smiled. "The bus is coming soon. We have to get there in time." Kathy looked at him pleadingly, as if begging him to stay at least another minute. "I don't believe in eviction." The landlady addressed him. "I must admit, the whole thing seemed strange to me," Jason replied. "Jason, come on. Please," Katie begged. "All right," he surrendered, unable to withstand her hopeful look. "Barbara, any money I'll pay. As long as you treat all right," she agreed. "I don't need the money. But there is one request. "I'll tell you when you're well deal," Jason replied without hesitation. He was sure he wouldn't have to fulfill the request. The guests stayed the night in Barbara's small hut. Early in the morning, Katie awoke. She peeked out from under the blanket and saw her hostess preparing some kind of potion. There was already a fire burning in the stove. On the stove, something large from a pot exuded the smell of food. The girl closed her eyes and imagined the same old cottage of her grandmother, which always smelled appetizingly of baked goods, dried mushrooms, and raspberry jam. Strangely enough, Barbara was not at all embarrassed by the arrival of the guests. On the contrary, she had persuaded them to move in temporarily because their house was closed for a while. Her yard was bustling with life, with goats scurrying about. A couple of goats from somewhere deep within the buildings. A large black and white cow made a lingering sound that was new to Jason. This kind of environment was new to him. Everything surprised and amused him. He was still alert, but he still had headaches and a terrible weakness that forced him to lie down day and night.
Katie, on the contrary, felt like a fish in water in the village house. She was an excellent housekeeper, skilled in animal handling, milking the cow and stoking the stove. It was getting colder and colder outside. Snow was falling, foreshadowing the imminent winter. A month passed unnoticed by everyone. Barbara showed up with her potions, which she continued to make good-natured fun of, giving Jason a cool compress when he was in a lot of pain.
And she made him take up hardening. He only really approved of the latter and went outside every morning to douse himself with warm water, gradually lowering the temperature. "I'll be able to swim in the ice hole by winter," he reported, clearing the yard with a shovel. When Kathy returned from the village with her shopping, she stood beside him and looked at him in surprise. "What are you doing?" she asked confusedly. In the time they'd spent together, all three of them had switched to you. "Shoveling snow." "What did you think?" Jason smiled. "Snow," she repeated, as if not understanding the meaning of what he said. "How are you feeling?" "Fine, but it wouldn't hurt to lie down." That was only the first bell. He was indeed getting better every day. And after 2 months, Jason could walk to the store on his own, carrying water and firewood. And on New Year's Day, he cleared out the big tree in the yard, which soon glowed with colorful balls. Katie was childishly excited about New Year's Eve, determined not to think about the future, at least during this vacation. In January, it was decided to return. Katie went to check on the house, putting the place in hasty order. She headed for the exit, but at the door she ran into Annie, who apparently wasn't the first time she'd come, trying to track down her husband. "Who are you?" she asked sharply, squeamishly looking Katie over from head to toe. It didn't matter. Not wanting to talk, she locked the door and walked past. "Where's Jason?" Annie asked, puzzled. Katie turned around at that moment and looked angrily at the diamond-clad rich man in the mink coat.
"You'd probably want him to be in the other world, wouldn't you?" she exclaimed. "What kind of nonsense is that? It's nonsense to order wreaths and dig a grave for a living person. I promise you. You won't get what you want. Jason will be alive and well."
With those words, Katie turned and walked away. She was seething with resentment, and not even the cold winter wind could cool the fire. Annie remained standing, not knowing how to react. The whole business had already been formally taken over by her, and in fact it no longer belonged to him, but was run by her lover. Waiting for recovery was going to get in the way of the ambitious couple, and something had to be done about it. Katie returned and told Jason what had happened, but Jason, inspired by the miraculous rescue, didn't want to fight or revenge. "Let her do what she wants," he said. "God is her judge. I don't care about that now. I need to save my health and start a new life." Feeling energized, Jason set about renovating the house. In addition to his business accounts, he had some savings for a rainy day. His wife didn't know about them, so cashing them out was no problem. Katie planned to get a job on the farm, but in the meantime she was helping him settle in. Now, after his recovery, Jason could confess his feelings to her without fear of condemning her to a lifetime of caring for a hopeless patient. She was happy, and of course reciprocated. Once he had taken care of the household chores, he suggested that Kathy visit Barbara and see what she wanted to ask in exchange for his help. "I've been looking forward to it," she said as she set the tea on the table. "I can't do it alone." "Maybe you can." Barbara's daughter had gone to the city in search of a better life, to earn money, if she was lucky, to get married. There were no other options for her in the country but the farm, and that was not a fate she was happy with. After changing several places, Annie found a job with good pay and conditions. Some wealthy man was looking for a maid. Of course, a girl from the backwoods was happy with all this decent money, huge, beautiful houses. Then the employer began to show her signs of attention. "I told her, give it up, come home. We'll live together. Maybe you'll meet a good, hard-working man," sadly told the witch doctor. But it was as if she didn't even hear. She just said, "Be happy for me. We're happy." And then suddenly she disappeared. A month or two later, I pelted her with letters. She doesn't say a word. When I got there, I realized everything at once. I could already see her belly. Barbara's daughter was pregnant with twins. The boys were born healthy. But the youngest mom had a hemorrhage. They fought for her life for days. "It was the worst day of my life," Barbara cried. "I still can't believe she's gone. And I can't see the boys." "Where are they now?" "Who are they with?" Jason asked. "Their father took them to his house, but he let me see them. even brought them here a few times. They're about 10 now. They're big, the loving grandmother said with pride in her voice. Now he's in jail for something. And my boys are with my stepmother, but she doesn't need them at all. She only needs money, that's all. Jason promised to help. He called up some old friends to get the addresses. 2 weeks later, they sent him all the information and he was on his way to New York for the first time since he'd moved to the village. The apartment where the boys and their stepmother lived was in a new high-rise. Climbing to the 11th floor, Jason rang the doorbell and was opened by a tall, slender brunette. "What do you want?" she asked in a rough, unpleasant voice, and he smelled cigarettes. "I'm looking for Inna Vitalievna," I said. She looked him over and found him attractive. "Are you here?" and flapped her unnaturally long eyelashes. At that moment, 2 blonde heads looked out of the room and looked at the guest with curiosity. Inna turned around and snarled angrily. "Well, go away, stick out. Learn your lessons." "I just came to see them," Jason explained calmly.
To see them? The stepmother's face changed.
"What do you want?" "I want to know why you won't let them see their grandmother." "That's crazy money it took. So tell her she won't get a penny. Now get out of here." "Wait a minute. I'm not waiting for anything. Go away, or I'll scream and call the police." The last thing Jason saw were 2 hopeful eyes staring at him from behind the door. On his way home, he decided to do whatever it took to help the boys get back to their grandmother's house. They would be much better off there than with that woman, and if housing was an issue, he would buy them a house in the village or the nearest town. Jason found a lawyer, and he began to prepare the documents for filing with the court. Now all they had to do was wait until everything was ready. He and Kathy settled down, made repairs, updated the furniture, and thought about opening a small company. And in the spring, a very happy event came to their home. Kathy is pregnant. No sooner had the happy couple rejoiced at this event, as Annie appeared on the threshold of the house, like storm clouds on a warm summer day. She didn't look as smug as usual. "I really need your help," she said. Quietly, Jason led her outside. "I thought I'd already done everything for you," he said, smiling slightly. "Isn't there more to it? You couldn't steal my money?" "Jason, I'm sorry. Life has punished me for everything. All right, tell me what happened, and then we'll go." "Alex was taken hostage." "Do you understand?" she cried. "Alex who? Who took him hostage?" "Explain. I don't understand." "Their business problems started a month ago, but the current managers, Alexander and part-timer Lover, to the last convinced everyone that nothing terrible would happen. They decided to open a food market next to the existing one, and the competitors did not keep waiting. The owners started receiving threats. Annie got a phone call that morning. She told the story in bits and pieces, interrupted by sobs. Alex had been kidnapped and demanded a ransom equal to the value of the business she had fraudulently inherited from her ex-husband. "Were you sure about that, Alex?" Jason asked. "Don't be jealous," Annie asked. "I love him more than life. I won't let anything happen to him." "No, let's go to the police."
Annie jumped up, grabbed her bag, and started for the door. Her face was red with anger and fear.
"I came to you for help, not for you to talk me out of it." She never showed her face at Katie's again. Jason settled into his quiet life. The house shone clean. There was a small vegetable garden and fruit orchards, and a nice fence around the property. A new gate had been installed, and all the villagers passed by and admired it. Jason seriously considered opening a company, bought the place from the collapsed collective farm, hired employees to rebuild the cowshed and clear the area of garbage. Kathy decided to take veterinary courses and planned to get a lot done before giving birth. Everything was going well, but there was one thing that wouldn't budge. Barbara was still waiting for her grandchildren to come home, and her stepmother wasn't planning to give them up so easily. The lawyer had filed a petition with the court, then prepared appeals, gathered a mountain of documents, but the decision had gotten bogged down somewhere in the paperwork to make it stick. Jason found out where the twins' father was serving time and went there himself. It wasn't without difficulty that he managed to arrange a meeting. The man was seriously ill, lying in the hospital wing. The prisoner seemed to be a broken man, but retained the remnants of his former beauty. He took a breath after descending the stairs and scrutinized the visitor, trying to understand what business he might have come for. "That's it," the prisoner exhaled after Jason's story. "I'm all in favor of the boys living with their grandmother. You can be sure they didn't give up. I've arranged for them to get money every month, so she's getting her lips done with it." He said it without offense, but with irony. Jason was reminded of Inna's artificial appearance and her swagger. "Aren't you hoping to get out of here early?" "No, I've already got lung cancer," he said, and then added sadly, "Life is coming to an end. I left money for the boys. They each have their own account. They'll get it after 18, and Barbara Alexievna will get it too. You give me the amount, I'll tell you where it is. They can't live in a hut in the middle of the woods." With the father's written permission to take the children, it was much easier. And in a couple of weeks after this trip, they were already running along the dusty country road to their grandmother's new house. By this time, she had baked pies and walked from window to window, waiting for her favorite granddaughters. After living with a hateful stepmother, the boys were happy to be near their own person. Barbara loved them with all of her heart. She was kind and allowed them all the joys of village life. To pitch a tent in the garden, to lie on the roof and look at the stars, to go fishing early in the morning, to sleep on a bed with Irene on the veranda. She also took Jason's word that they wouldn't leave the twins if anything happened to her. "I'm not an old woman. It's scary if my grandchildren end up with strangers again," she told the couple. And they agreed without question, even though they argued, saying, "Don't think about bad things before you think." "How did she give them to you?" Katie wondered after they got back from town. "Hardly," Jason answered. "She was so hysterical. It scared me, not to mention the kids. She said she was going to destroy me." And was it really about the money? Now everyone wanted to forget about the past and start over, and there were plenty of reasons to do so. Katie was expecting a baby. The first calves had arrived on the farm, and there were plenty of people wanting to work. There'd been no jobs in the village for a long time. An opportunity came along, but the past stubbornly persisted, reminding her of herself again and again. One fine morning, Annie Zadorazny appeared on the doorstep with a bag in her hands. It was hard to recognize her. No fancy clothes, heels, jewelry, and makeup, only bags under her eyes. From the bag on her shoulders and the sad look in her eyes, Jason could easily guess that she'd given the business to those very thugs. But where was her beloved Alex? "What's wrong with you?" he asked, stepping out into the yard. "Jason, I came to see you," Annie replied. "Why?" "I don't understand. I need a place to live. I'm ready to work. I thought you were back in business." "Where's your lover?" "Jason, he betrayed me when someone asked me to ransom him. It wasn't true. He conspired with them, and I was just being played. Annie cried. "I see. Well, can I offer you a job as a milkmaid? It's all I've got." She stayed. It was better for her to live with her ex-husband than to try to start from scratch. Of course, Katie resented this arrangement, but she kept her feelings in check so as not to make herself and Jason unnecessarily jealous. It was almost 2 months before the birth, and everyone was looking forward to meeting the baby. Katie sewed diapers and bonnets. Jason had brought the crib and planned to assemble it soon. The twins were inventing new games and making rattles, which Barbara filled with fragrant herbs. Everyone had joy and anticipation of a miracle. Just not Annie. The dirty work made her appearance rougher and her character more withdrawn. Contrary to expectations, she did not leave. In her first month of hard labor, she continued to persevere on the farm, doing everything she was asked to do. On a winter evening, Katie sat at home. Her husband had left for town in the afternoon and must have decided to stay there until morning, for a blizzard was raging outside. The roads had turned to snowdrifts in a matter of hours, and the wind was howling drearily from the window. When she heard footsteps outside the door, Katie was glad that Jason had probably come home. He was always calmer with her. She'd been feeling sick to her stomach all day, and it was frightening. It was a few kilometers to the hospital, but Annie appeared at the door, wearing felt boots and a woolen shawl over her hat. "What happened to you?" Katie thought, remembering the diamond-clad beauty walking proudly down the corridor in heels. "Are you alone?" "It's cold," asked the guest. "What did you want?" "I wanted to tell you something that you might have guessed yourself that you don't understand." Katie tried to remain calm, her temples throbbing unpleasantly, and her stomach tugged unbearably again. "Oh, come on. I've never noticed Jason coming home late from work," Annie said with cold gloating. "He works hard," Katie replied, getting up from the couch and going to the window, hoping to see her husband. Unfortunately, there was nothing but thick darkness. "He wants a naive, stupid fool. I'm tired of running from him, though sometimes I can't help myself. I'll be honest with you." Annie smiled, pleased with the effect she was having on Katie, but soon the smile faded, replaced by alarm and, finally, horror as the pregnant woman suddenly grabbed her stomach and sat on the floor, letting out an inhuman scream. Annie ran up to her and tried to turn her around, but she pushed her away with force. "Get out!" Katie screamed, still holding her stomach. I'm dying. Should I call Barbara?" The milkmaid was completely freaked out. She hadn't gotten up in 2 days. Katie exhaled. The contraction passed, but the next one came. It was clear to both of them that labor had begun, and no one could help them. This frightening thought left Annie in a stupor. For several minutes she stood in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do or where to run. Finally, gathering her thoughts, she went to the closet, opened it, took out the sheets and spread them on the floor, moving Katie onto them. The forced midwife went to the kitchen and washed her hands thoroughly. Found a towel and diapers, coming with a desire for revenge. Annie quickly realized her new role. There was no escape. All disagreements and grudges were best left for later. Katie cried, moaning, the cool compress on her forehead instantly warming. She was thirsty. Calling for Jason, her train of thought was more like the ramblings of a sick man. The night was going to be hard, endless, agonizing. The first thing Jason heard when he entered the house in the morning was the cry of a baby. His heart quickened. For a few moments he stood in the hallway as if afraid to move. The arrival of his daughter was a surprise he had not expected to receive that morning. It was no less of a surprise that Annie was giving birth to a girl. And Katie, covered in a warm blanket, was resting on the bed. She smiled and held out her hand to him. "How I thought it was early," Jason mumbled confusedly. She rushed at Katie, answered him in a weak voice. The experience of childbirth was a life-changing one, not only for the laboring woman herself, but also for her longtime detractor. We see the fear she experienced that night. Something changed in her soul. Annie became even more withdrawn and silent, and soon surprised everyone with a new decision. "I'm going into a convent. I've already written a letter, and I've been told they're waiting for me." "You've decided that?" Jason marveled. "You can't make it up. I need a secretary in the office right now. Thought I'd offer you one. No. It's already decided," she replied calmly. And after asking to be left alone with Katie, said, "I'm sorry for everything. I'm going away to absolve myself of my sins beforehand. I want to apologize right away." "Jason, I didn't cheat on you. I made it up at the time to hurt you. I thought you were the cause of all my troubles, but you weren't." And she left, apparently finding herself in ministry. In letters, she regularly reported that she was living well. She promised to come visit by summer. It took Jason and Kathy a long time to get used to it, but in time they accepted it as it was. They named their daughter Barbara. The girl, with the same red hair and funny ears as her mother's, grew up to be a fun-loving, naughty girl. Especially her appearance pleased the twins. They did not dote on her. They fulfilled all requests and took her with them on important tasks, such as hammering apples or eating currants from the neighbors' bushes. In a few years, the farm had grown to the size of a large farm and was already bringing the owners a good income. The road they had built to the village carried daily loads of milk, eggs, hay, and straw. Jason, who had started with zero knowledge, was suddenly one of the most experienced farmers in the area, and he was very proud of it. Past sufferings lost their former meaning: a cozy and hospitable house, a friendly family. Now they had everything for real happiness. "Why didn't your wife wash my clothes?" the disgruntled mother said to her son. When the daughter-in-law heard this, she yelled at her mother-in-law so hard that her jaw dropped. Lexi was the first to leave home. There were 2 daughters in the family, but the older one was always called Lexi. The younger one, Gloria, gloomily thought her parents were sucking up. Lexi was different in personality, inheriting nothing from her mother and father. Maybe she'd been taken in an orphanage or even switched midwives. Parents are creative people, not of this world. Both artists. The house is a creative mess. Gloria herself saw her father thoughtfully stirring soup on the stove with a brush handle. The family's money is lean and mean. Then they buy a painting, and then the parents and their friends go to a cafe. And the next morning they divide a couple of bags of Nescafe into 4 cups by the number of family members. In the evening they eat empty potatoes, just boiled and eaten. Lexi, on the other hand, had an iron grip on her life and her routine. She knew exactly what she wanted. Pretty girl, natural blonde, looks like silent movie actresses. A lady like that doesn't seem to care about her career. If some earl found her, put her in a castle, she'd be in her place. But at the same time, Gloria thought Lexi had a chicken brain. In school, her sister's B's in all subjects were so rare that it was time to celebrate in a cafe. C's were given to her because D's would get her not only Lena, but also the teachers. And where to go after graduation with such performance? The parents had no time to take their heads in their hands, but Lexi put them in front of the fact. "I'm going to Penavembury to live and work there." "But who's waiting for you there?" Mom blurted out. Lexi looked at her like she was clueless. "Not staying here? What kind of life is there?" And her parents had already thought of everything. They'd made a plan. Lexi would marry one of her many suitors. She'd be followed by the sons of wealthy parents. The daughter's life would be secure. You can graduate from Yellowberry. If it's a fee-paying department, they don't expect much ability from students. Her parents would grow old, and Lexi self-confident, never complex. Able to put anyone in their place would be their support in their old age. She'll look out for their interests. But everything turned out exactly the opposite. Lexi arrived in Pennsylvania, got off the train and went to the Glory area, a huge shopping mall shining with lights. She was sitting on a bench in the middle of all this splendor and drinking coffee when a woman came up to her and asked, "Do you need a job?" Lexi was a saleswoman for a short time, and after 2 months she moved to a sports club as an administrator. She had an affair with someone. Her parents realized their daughter wasn't coming back. And not her, but they should help her at first. There was no money at the time. I mean, absolutely. So they took in my grandmother, my mom's mom. They sold her apartment and her summer house. They used the money to buy Lexi a place to live in Pennsylvania. Find something in the suburbs, so it would be cheaper and a separate apartment. Lexi said, "No, I want downtown." Downtown was enough money for a 10-foot dead room. Not with some grandmother's repair, but one with no floor was necessary to lay boards, to wash the walls from black mold, and to keep the windows open for a week. Then, maybe, the smell of booze will go away. In the past, a scientist who had drunk himself into a bit of a lunatic had lived here. Many times they wanted to evict him, but his students, influential people, interceded and the professor was left alone. The rest of the apartment was in slightly better condition, but it was also scary to look at. Lexi only had 2 neighbors, an intelligent old poetess and a young girl student, orphans. Parents died in a car accident. When they split the inheritance, they split the apartment. Sanka got a room in a communal apartment. Having got acquainted with the neighbors, Lexi's parents somewhat cheered up. Now the repair seemed to them not an impossible task for creative people, but an act of charity, an opportunity to do a good deed. Bringing the apartment to the bare minimum would not only benefit their daughter, but also an old lady and a student who had no one to take care of them. The helplessness of both was striking. The old woman seemed to be on the gramber of marasmus, and the student was a kindred spirit, a jewelry artist in the future. Late at night she burned light in her room, made simple jewelry to have some income to the scholarship. After her parents provided her with a room, they thought they owed her nothing more. Lexi's parents sold the paintings, the most precious to their hearts. Before, they wanted to keep them for themselves and then pass them on to their children. There was only one painting left at home, a portrait of her mom, painted by her father. Mom was very young in it, younger than Lexi is now. Other artists didn't like the work. They said it was too primitive, too head-on. A girl in a blue knit dress standing near a birch tree. Her blonde hair is loose. She looks down. She's thinking. "What can you say ... such ... Amanda," Daddy's friend said condescendingly, and added, "You can draw swans on the pond and kittens in a box. People will buy them in village houses. Just don't ask too much." From then on, Gloria thought that there were no trees prettier than birches, no outfits better than blue dresses, and no girls prettier than her mother. Leaving Gloria in her grandmother's care, her parents spent the entire vacation in Pennsylvania. The money was enough only for materials. To hire professionals is no longer on what. So the parents rolled up their sleeves and did everything themselves: whitewashing, painting, tiling. When the apartment was poor but clean, her parents moved Lexi here. But she stayed only a few months. All this time she was moving toward the goal she saw so clearly in herself and her family did not see. Lexi got married and moved in with her husband, albeit in the suburbs, but in a mansion. The luxurious house made it easy to put up with the distance, especially since Lexi had her own car. What about the room? Lexi's parents asked her when they arrived at the wedding, "Will you sell it?" Young people today will do that. They're willing to downgrade their homes to go to Zagrebutsu and flood the internet with photos. "No," Lexi said, "no selling. It's our families to keep, no matter how life turns out." Parents are dreaming. Now they'd take a youthful dip once a year, come to Pennsylvania to paint, architecture, northern nature, and also can, holding hands, wander the streets, go to theaters, sit in outdoor cafes. Gloria asked, "What about me?" Gloria was an honors student, so her parents had a program for her. She would graduate from high school and go to an institute. There was only one in the city, Polytechnic. But it used to be that engineers were pitied and made jokes about their small salaries. Nowadays, a man with a technical diploma is a valuable manpower. Gloria will get a diploma, get a good job, find a promising young man among her colleagues. Gloria's point of view was resentment and injustice. Everything was sold for Lexi, nothing of little value was left at home. And she, Gloria, by the way, had to live with her grandmother in a room, to put up with her age. So Lenka got Pennsylvania and a millionaire, and she got an institute with math, which she never liked, a dirty factory the city was choking on its emissions, and a nerd as a husband. And then for her to look after her parents, since she is the youngest daughter, and under the side. Lexi is good, if the money will send. And the decision matured instantly. In the evening, Gloria told her father and mother, "I'm going to Pennsylvania now. Do we have a room there?" "We do. That's where I'll live. Don't worry about the rest." "But we let a lodger in," Mom whispered. "So call him and tell him to get out, but let him keep the key. But he pays. We wanted to save this money, and then once a year to come and live on them on vacation. The boy goes home to the Camberculas and we go to Pensbury for a vacation. I used to think you took Lexi from the orphanage because she's so self-sufficient and self-interested, but now I think I'm the foundling. How can you give one person everything and the other nothing? That same evening, my mom called the same student, told him that the plans had changed and asked him to vacate the room. Gloria went to the northern capital and enrolled in medical school on a budget. She decided that it was necessary to get a grip, to settle in, and then she could go to the institute. But even in college, she finished her studies because she got married, and shortly before graduation, she was expecting a child. Gloria's millionaire husband was a long way from being a millionaire. Her Vincent had just come from the provinces, started a car service business. Maybe he perceived Gloria, as with housing, and also thought you have to start somewhere, something to hold on to. Vincent lived on rent and assessed Gloria's room, as well as the apartment as a whole, as promising. He was rubbing his hands together. "Let them sign the meters over to you," he said, referring to his wife's in-laws. "And there. I have a plan." It was hard to scratch out a room, but they managed. Lexi and her husband had gone to Europe. Her husband had a business in England. Against this backdrop, pregnant, wringing her hands, Gloria, who had nowhere to bring the baby, seemed like a creature from another planet. The sister signed the deed of gift, as if she had severed the last thread linking her to her homeland. "Look," Vincent told his wife, satisfied that grandmother is about to die. "We can sign a contract with her that we buy her kefir until her death, Vali Dal bring, and she on us formalizes her housing. We'll make a deal." Vincent was sure of it. "And the other neighbor?" Gloria asked. She hadn't been able to make friends with either Mary or Sandra since she'd lived here. Somehow they had developed a mutual dislike for each other. Gloria wasn't used to communal living, and she wasn't going to get used to it. She lives in a room, and that's her territory. Everything else is none of her business. The janitors cleaned the street, the janitors cleaned the entryway, and probably someone else cleaned here too. Somebody was Sandra. You can hang a duty roster on the bathroom door all you want. But Mary was walking around with a stick. Sandra felt sorry for the old woman, and when she tried to clean, she took the bucket and mop away from her. And she drew Mary. She had a noble face, fine features, a crown of snow-white hair. She had noble blood. It'd be too expensive to fight with Gloria. Sandra didn't know how to scandalize it all. You could, of course, tell the neighbor. But Sandra knew from experience that Gloria would say something like, "You clean it up, you clean it up," and slam the door in her face. And if you think about all this, if you feel like a servant when you mop the floors of the whole apartment, then after a long time your cheeks will burn and your hands will tremble, and you won't be able to paint, let alone do painstaking jewelry work. Sandra was distracted. She scrubbed the floors and hummed, so as not to nurture anger in her soul. Besides, Sandra had a vulnerable spot, and it was called a pig. Once Sandra had been asked to hold a mini pig, which acquaintances of acquaintances of acquaintances transported from point A to point B, and needed a point CA transfer point. At that time, there was nothing to talk about. A tiny pig resembled a live toy. And then the built plan fell apart. A friend said that her friends somewhere merged. She cannot take the piglet to herself. She has a small child. And let Sandra, you have an angelic character in your neighbor. An old lady, too, to hold the piglet at her place, until he will not find another family. No family was found. The pig grew up. At that time, only Sandra and Mary lived in the apartment. The latter talked to the pig like a child, read him poems and gave him chocolate chip cookies. She read her poems to everyone. When she had the strength, she'd go downstairs. She'd stand on the boulevard and read to passers-by. The poems were good, but people got lost. They searched with their eyes for a cap, a bowl, where they could put their money. The bravest tried to slip bills into little lace-gloved hands. Mary lifted her chin. "The poem is my gift to you. People should give each other the most precious things. Only then will this world stand." The pig, whose name the old lady had chosen Sergo, walked on a leash like a dog. He was very clean in general. Sandra, who knew that sooner or later there would be neighbors who would demand that Sergo be evicted, was carrying an extra load. She became a volunteer cleaner. And if she rebelled against the fact that she had to clean the communal apartment every day, then only in the shower. So what about the other roommate? Gloria asked her husband. It's easy with her. We'll buy her a place to live in a squat where they'll tolerate her pig. Gloria laughed. She remembered the look on Vincent's face when he'd first come to visit, washing his hands before he sat down at the table. And then Sergo peeked out of the room. Are you going to talk? Gloria asked. You'd better. Maybe you'll find an approach with all your feminine stuff. Press on pity, say we have a child, we need meters. Then we'll go together. You'll stand next to her. And if she doesn't agree, you'll tell her you'll stab Sergo too. She'll agree, don't doubt it. She'd sell her soul for that pig. In a way, you're lucky to live with two crazy people. Let's start with the weak option. Gloria suggested to buy time. The weak option is the old woman. Gloria saw it herself. It's hard for her to even lift the kettle to pour boiling water into a cup. The old woman would obviously agree to have gift helpers. There were things that bothered Gloria, but she didn't want to think about them. She didn't want to be a babysitter for the old woman, for example. And she didn't want to be the old woman's babysitter. Vincent was gone all day, and what was in store for her? Gloria. She'd be torn between a small child and a grandmother who wanted her heels scratched. We need to make a contract so the old lady doesn't back off, and it should clearly state what they owe her. Like bringing her groceries from the store and calling the doctor. As long as Vincent doesn't tell her that Gloria has a medical degree herself. Otherwise, it's going to start take my blood pressure. Give me a shot. Will these pills help me? And the second interesting point to know how long the grandmother will live in the world. Bumping into Mary in the hallway, Gloria gave her a predatory stare, hoping to pick out any weaknesses. The old woman's gait was shuffling, leaning heavily on a stick, her legs no longer holding her up. Dismay. And when she washes dishes in the kitchen, the plates slip out of her hands, breaking. She can't even sweep up the splinters, the smaller ones she can't see on the floor. There was one more option, for the last resort. If the old woman lasted longer than was decent, she would have to be recognized as incapable, since she could no longer serve herself. Then she can be moved to a nursing home. But there's no way around it. First, you have to win Mary's trust. This will not be quite easy, since Gloria has already repeatedly rude to the old woman. Now she would have to change tactics. Gloria had no doubt that she would eventually succeed in winning the old woman's favor. So she didn't put off the conversation until the last minute. The very next day, she found Mary in the kitchen while she was making oatmeal, offered her tea and cake. Gloria was surprised by the result. The old lady tightened her lips and asked coldly, "What do you want from me?" "I want to talk." Mary didn't even sit down at the table, even though Gloria had called for her. She stood leaning on not one but two sticks. That's how she got around when she was having a particularly rough day, when everything hurt. Gloria, who had set herself up for an affectionate and patronizing tone as if she could see how it would be better old people are like little children. They need to be told everything. Gloria was now confused and babbled about care and concern. "I don't want to," Mary said simply. "I don't want anyone interfering in my life." "Gloria, I understand what you want. In the end, you want my room. But that's not going to happen. I have a niece, and I'm writing my will in her favor." "Why doesn't she visit and help you, this niece?" Gloria, frustrated by the collapse of her plans, could no longer hold back, her voice sounding angry. "That's none of your business," the old woman said. She had to leave one stick in the kitchen. And leaning heavily on the other, she went to her room, taking with her a small pot of oatmeal. She didn't want to see Gloria for an extra minute or eat in front of her. In the evening, Gloria told her husband. Vincent didn't believe it. "Come on, she's bluffing. Nobody saw that niece. I guess the old woman wants us to bring her kefir, but also to give her money. We have to put pressure on her." "How? She's lived here all her life. She's a native. She knows the value of her room. She's not going to give it up, judging by her tone. If she's a native, she remembers the 90s. That's the way to talk to her." Vincent went to the old lady himself, told Gloria stay out of it. "Or you'll say something pathetic. It's got to be tough." He came back about 20 minutes later. His shirt collar was unbuttoned, his neck was sweaty. He hadn't been a guest, he'd been in a bathhouse. "She's so old, she's not afraid of anything," he answered Gloria's mute question. "What can you scare her with?" Mary told Sandra what they were talking about. She went to her room, brought her some dried goods. They drank tea with them, and Sergo ate the rest. It was his favorite treat. Do you know, Sandrenka, what he offered me? A small apartment on the first floor somewhere in the suburbs. There's a park across the street and a clinic nearby. What else do you want? Sitting on the bed, you can reach every corner of the room. Sandra did not think that her old neighbor, who has already seen so much in her life, so much will get so mad ordinary bore. Mary, calm down. No one's going to force you to sell or trade anything against your will. It's impossible. You know, child, what hurts? It's probably my stupidity. But I let it slip that this apartment once belonged entirely to my family, starting with my great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother. And I've lived here all my life. You don't replant an old tree with roots. I want to leave in my native walls. They took me in. They will see me off. I'm talking, but I see Vincent's fingers drumming on the table. It's all lyrics to him, cheap foreign lyrics that don't cost a penny. He doesn't want to hear it, and he doesn't want to hear it. That is, everything I explained to him, he let it pass his ears and his heart. He asks, why don't you think about it some more? I shake my head no. And he said venomously so, my wife and I are in trouble. You stink up the whole apartment with your old man's odor. Soon you'll start losing your stuff in the hallway, and we have a child to raise here. My wife offered to take care of you, you stubbornly refused. You don't want to move out to a separate apartment, well, blame yourself. Sandra wanted to jump up from her seat, to go to the neighbors, preferably to kick in the door. And Mary touched her arm. Calm down, baby. I told him no, and I'll stand my ground. But what I'm bitter about is this. He could have opened his cards and asked for a man's life. We have a young family, we'll have children. It'll be hard for us to raise them, we'll be cramped. We're ready to buy you an apartment where it's convenient, and we'll pay you extra with money. That's human, with respect for me. And he tried to cheat the old woman, as they say nowadays, to get a free ride. What if it works out? What if I, a fool, agree? But he punished himself. If I had a good relationship with him and Gloria, like you and me, I could have bequeathed the apartment to their child. After all, I don't have any niece. Sergo rubbed his heel against Mary's leg, begging for something tasty. She held out a sandwich to him in the palm of her hand. Take it, dear. You're much better mannered than some people. It's my turn now, said Sandra, or rather, it's Sergo's and mine. We're going to survive. You're right, our neighbors just want the whole apartment. If they haven't even mentioned the extra payment to you, it means that Vincent is counting every ruble. Sergo's the only person I've got close to me. We can try to find him a good home, but Gloria and Valia won't stop there. Even if I live here alone, they'll still suggest I move somewhere dark. You know, dear, maybe it's a good thing for you, Mary said suddenly. Sandra was so surprised that it was reflected on her face. Even her mouth opened slightly. Why is that? You see, Mary was silent for a few seconds, not too good to do in this house. Talking to you is an outlet for me. I find my second self in you. But I'd be very happy if you'd move somewhere else. No, I don't want to. This street itself fascinates me. These old houses, each with its own destiny. From here it's 2 steps to the parks, to the theaters. If there's such an expression as the whole world in my pocket, then I can say I have the whole culture in my pocket here. Well, let's hope that this cup will pass over this apartment, Mary said vaguely, and did not want to explain further. She just scratched Sergo behind his ear and offered him another dryer. From that evening, Sandra was preparing herself for an unpleasant conversation with Valia or Gloria. The neighbors were quiet for a while, although it was clear that it was the calm before the storm. Gloria barely said hello, acting as if she were the only owner of the apartment, and the rest were just random visitors who for some reason could not be kicked out, no matter how disturbing they were. That evening, Sandra suddenly found out that there was food at home only for Sergo. She had been working all day making a brooch of pink lily of the valley. It seemed as if you could hold it to your nose and smell spring. But her back ached, her neck ached, the fridge was a mess, and it was raining outside. Sandra decided to order takeout. When she felt that the jewelry turned out the way she wanted, the body began to spend energy with triple force, attacked the creative fever. Alguna vez su madre lavaba un vestido que le gustaba en la tienda, no por su precio, sino simplemente porque su madre pensó que era hermoso. Cuando sus padres sumaron sus sueldos, apenas había suficiente para la vida y para sus 2 hijos Sandra y su hermano pequeño Augusta. Ahora Sandra ganaba lo suficiente, pero que podía comprarse a su padre y a su madre. Solo un hermoso monumento. Hacía tiempo que la ambulancia se había marcado. Sandra estaba tumbada en la cama, tapada con una manta con la cabeza. Desde niña le parecía que era más seguro así. De esta manera nada malo podía pasar. El monumento lo eligió y lo colocó su tía, la hermana de su madre. Ella también le llevó a August. Fue un intercambio complicado. La tía de los padres, de 3 habitaciones, y la de Sandra, de una, se intercambiaron por un piso de 2 habitaciones para la tía, que se quedó con la custodia de August, y una habitación para Sandra. La chica estuvo de acuerdo de inmediato, después de haber aprendido que veía vivir entre las antigüedades legendarias. Y ahora mirar por la ventana en las paredes amarillas tristes con el sudor y un patio donde crece una sola brizna de herba. Tolerar el barrio de Gloria con valía y limpiar todo el apartamento. Incluso cuando sus vecinos no le decían ni una sola palabra, Sandra podía sentir las vibraciones venenosas que provenían de ellos. Es duro estar cerca de gente que quiere que te es más que nada en el mundo. Había 2 opciones. La primera era retirarse. No se quedaría sin un lugar donde vivir, ni siquiera gente como sus vecinos pensarían en eso. Por su habitación Sandra podría conseguir un apartamento independiente en algún lugar de las afueras para cerrarla por detrás de sí, y sin cocinas ni baños compartidos. Pero no será por muchos años luego agudizar la humiliación que tan fácilmente se rindió bajo la presión de la gente grosera. Les proporcionó condiciones. La segunda opción es luchar. Ponga Sergo en buenas manos, a fin de no dar a los vecinos triunfos. El cerdo es un pura sangre, tiene documentos internacionales. Él puede ir al extranjero, a diferencia de Sandra. Ella no tiene pasaporte. ¿Qué pasará después? Gloria y Valia operan la habitación de María. Tarde o temprano ocurrirá. Aunque hay que esperar a que la vieja se vaya. Los vecinos se esparcirán en un banquet para conseguir esos metros. Hoy Sandra se quedará sola en un campo hostil. Volverá a casa y sentirá cuánto la odia todo el mundo. Tendrá que encerrarse en su habitación porque Sandra nunca aprenderá a escandalizar. No tiene ese gen del escándalo en su programa interno y no tiene dónde sacarlo. Sergo percibió el estado de ánimo de su ama. Cacareó sus pezuñas sobre el parque y hacían ruidos tintinantes y estrepitosos. Y empezó a mirarla ansiosamente a la cara, como si fuera un perro y lo entendiera todo. Luego la suegra. ¿Cuál es el problema de aguantar a un hombre durante una semana? Gloria se preguntó por qué estaba tratando esta visita tan corta como un desastre. Como si fuera un gato y la fueran a acariciar contra su pelaje durante una semana. Pero un gato puede escaparse al desván, al sótano, y encontrar otro gato, incluso mejor que el que está en casa. Pero Gloria no puede ir a ninguna parte. No hay a dónde ir. Su suegra es una muchachita demacrada. Vincent la recibió en la estación de tren, cargó sus maletas en el coche. Pero de donde venía la suegra, tenía que llevarlas hasta el tren. ¿Cómo iba a hacerlo? Las maletas ocupaban media cocina. Tarros de 3 litros con encurtidos, miel, manteca de cerdo e incluso un cadáver de pato, amarillo por la grasa. Ahora había comida suficiente para un mes. Gloria temía que su suegra hubiera cambiado de planes y se quedara 4 semanas en lugar de una. Y se dio cuenta de que nunca sería la nuera de Amber. La tía Amber no podía llamar la madre, su propia hija. Gloria había preparado una cena completa para la llegada de su invitada. Sirvió sopa de champiñones. No había sal en la mesa. Vincent fue a la cocina y cogió un poco. Su suegra apretó los labios. Gloria sirvió el segundo plato y recogió los platos sucios. Al salir por la puerta, lo oyó. Una buena anfitriona no se sienta si no hay nada en la mesa. Y su marido no sale corriendo a por sal. Tu padre no sabía dónde estaban mis platos. La relación se arregló de una vez por todas. Gloria no podía complacer a su suegra por mucho que lo intentara. Decidió no intentarlo en absoluto. Una vez más, tuvo que hablar mal de sus vecinos, incapaces de desaparecer en el aire para liberar el espacio que su familia necesitaba. Gloria fue a la tienda. Compró un biombo chino pajaros de vivos colores sobre fondo negro. Vincent ya había desmontado la cama gemela, y había literas estrechas a lo largo de las paredes. Gloria acercó la suya. Era mejor por un lado. Daba la ilusión de intimidad, tumbada con las piernas en alto. Y Gloria se le hincharon los pies con el embarazo. Por otro lado, daba la sensación de que la habitación pertenecía a su suegra o a su hijo, y ella, Gloria, era superflua. Escondida en un rincón, en su perrera. ¿Por qué había venido Amber? Se preguntó Gloria. Solían ir a las grandes ciudades a comprar cosas que no encontraban en el campo. Hacían una lista en más de una hoja de papel, incluyendo a parientes y conocidos. Pero ahora se puede comprar de todas partes. Y mi suegra no quería ir de compras. Gloria no se dio cuenta enseguida. Amber había viajado lejos para ver cómo le iba a su hijo. Ajustar su vida a lo que ella creía correcto. Aprendí a hornear le dijo a Gloria. Tú no te acerques al horno, pero deberías. Las tartas son tan útiles. Cuando crié a mis hijos, siempre tenía un plato de tartas en la mesa. Con patatas con col, con lo que fuera más barato, incluso con salchicha de hígado. Y mis hijos nunca pasaron hambre. Barato y abundante. Tienes carne en la mesa todos los días. Eso es mucho dinero para comida. Y Valia es la única que gana dinero. Una semana. Se repetía Gloria cada noche, solo una semana. Y ya ha pasado otro día. Vincent le dijo que le había comprado a su madre un billete de tren de vuelta. Gloria se animó y se prometió a sí a ella misma permanecer en cuadro durante el resto de la semana. Pero las buenas intenciones se sabe. Gloria trató de minimizar las conversaciones con su suegra, pero esta, como si no se diera cuenta de la antipatía de su nuera, preguntó con todo lujo de detalles. ¿Y quién lava aquí las latrinas? Una por una, contestó Gloria monosylábicamente. A ti no te toca. Es esa chica de la fregona. Es joven, no le cuesta mucho. ¿Y no está embarazada, por cierto? Porque le pagas dinero si lo tiene todo ella sola, fregando como una loca. No, le voy a dar una patada en el culo para que se largue. Le daré otra patada para que se cale, quiso decir Gloria, pero guardó silencio como un partisano, sometido e interrogatorio. Su paciencia se había agotado de repente. La única lavadora automática del piso pertenecía a Gloria. Se había apresurado a comprarla y había ocupado el mejor lugar, el cuarto de baño. Ya no cabía ninguna otra lavadora. A Gloria no le interesaba si Sandra y Mary lavaban la ropa en lavabos o en la lavandería. Y desde luego, a ninguna de sus vecinas se le habría ocurrido pedir permiso para lavar su ropa en la máquina de otra persona. Así que la pila de ropa que apareció sobre la lavadora no era dudosa de su pertenencia. Además, Gloria había visto East Jersey amarillo en su suegra. Y los pantalones también eran claramente de ella. Pero sería que se cogen dos dedos, se meten en la lavadora, se echa el polvo, se enciende el programa. O ya está. Es la madre del marido. Se marca dentro de 2 días. Pero Gloria sintió una novena oleada de irritación, incluso de odio. No quería tocar la ropa de aquella anciana, cogerla con las manos, aspirar el olor de su cuerpo sucio. Quería vengarse de alguna manera por una semana de vivir con la boca cerrada, con la boca tapada y incapaz de decir lo que pensaba. Empujó con el pie la ropa de la anciana hasta el rincón más sucio de la bañera y la pisoteó. Metió la ropa de cama en la lavadora. Antes de que llegara su marido, colgó sábanas y fundas nórdicas blancas como la nieve, perfumadas. Y mi suegra vio que sus cosas estaban sin lavar. Fui al baño a comprobarlo. Cuando volvió tenía los labios apretados. Cuando llegó Vincent, Gloria debía servir la cena. Pero dudo. Quería salir tranquilamente de la cocina, ir a la puerta y a lo que decía su abuela. Gloria no dudaba de que se quejaría. Pero había subestimado la indignación de Amber. Ni siquiera quería esconderse. Cuando Gloria puso un plato de chuletas y puré de patatas delante cada uno, su suegra preguntó, con la barbilla levantada, dirigiendo solo a su hijo, como si su nora ni siquiera estuviera aquí. ¿Por qué tu mujer no ha lavado mi ropa? Vincent tenía hambre. No tenía ganas de discutir. Debí de estar cansada, dijo diplomáticamente, blandiendo el tenedor. Si pasa el día tumbada en la cama, su suegra quiso resumir las observaciones de la semana. Why escupa el teco? Why le cuesta poner la colada? ¿Por qué? Ahí es donde Gloria se salió por la tangente. Porque no soy lavandera, dijo con una sonrisa que podía eclipsar al sol, por lo que tenía de oriente. Porque tú hijo y tú vives en mi casa. Why si lo esperáis, que os complazca otro, pero no yo. El suegra jadeó, con indignación y ganas de replicar. Si le desencajó la mandíbula. Why entonces una de ellas se movió de su sitio habitual. A mi suegra le hicieron la prótesis más barata en el hospital del distrito. Why no aguanto la emoción. Tuve que correr al baño para arreglarla. Fui una humiliación adida. Gloria salió para calmarse y preparar té. Cuando volvió, Vincent estaba ayudando a su madre a hacer las maletas. No había mucho. Su suegra había traído las cosas en bolsas grandes y su propia ropa en una pequeña. La ropa sucia estaba en una bolsa. ¿A dónde vais? Preguntó Gloria, enfatizando el tú. No le interesaba saber a dónde iba su suegra. A casa de un conocido, respondió Vincent secamente. Si había lavado a su madre, no había vuelto a casa por la noche. Pero Gloria sabía que solo era temporal. ¿A dónde iría? Un celo en el pasaporte, un teco y un hijo en el horizonte. Volverá como un bombón. Solo se cuidará con la vía hasta que la suba al tren para demostrar que está con ella. Y entonces vendrá. Sandra y Mary apenas se dieron cuenta de que un extraño vivía en el apartamento. Ya antes se habían sentido atraídas hacia sus habitaciones, como un caracol hacia su concha. La vociferante y perpetuamente descontenta Gloria llenaba todo el espacio del apartamento. Y no querían cruzarse con ella. Sandra estaba sentada en la cama, acariciando a Sergo, cubierto con una manta de cuadros escoceses, rascando el cuello. Pero sus pensamientos vagaban muy lejos. Se dio cuenta de que era poco probable que un incidente como un intento de suicidio en una sola casa llegara a los principales sitios de noticias. Así que ahora se limitaba a ir de una red social a otra, desplazándose por las noticias de la comunidad, mirando un día, 2, 3 por delante. Se dio cuenta de que este trabajo podía ser interminable y, incluso infructuoso. Y era aún más probable que así fuera. Pero qué extraña sensación era enterarse de lo que nadie más sabía. Es difícil ser Dios. Y incluso livar una pequeña chispa ser un visionario también y es muy difícil. Pues ver quién ganará un partido de fútbol, qué político tendrá un batacazo en su carrera, pero a Sandra no le interesaba nada de eso. De repente se estremeció y parpadeó mucho. Tenía la costumbre de parpadear, como si todo lo desagradable fuera a desaparecer por sí solo si parpadeaba, y luego lo miraba más de cerca. Volviendo a casa hoy, leyó en el foro, la primera hora de la noche, vio, y nosotros en el patio ambulancia se encuentra. Secana una chica. Tenía la cabeza destrozada, el pelo en que vi. La sacaron tan rápido. Quería acercarme y preguntar qué había pasado, pero la cargaron seguida, y se fueron, con intermitentes. Debajo del mensaje había una foto, al parecer tomada apresuradamente con un teléfono. Sandra parpadeó por última vez, nada había cambiado. Era la entrada de su casa, un graffiti familiar. Y en la Camila. Sí, parecía que era ella. Estaba cubierta de algo, pero ese pelo ensangrentado. ¿Se puede cambiar el destino? ¿O te seguirá lavando a la serpiente, como alega el profeta? Tratar de trepar o doblar las patas sobre el pecho, dejar que sí como será, Sandra echo un vistazo a la fecha. Sería dentro de 5 días. Así que solo tenía 5 días. Sabes el día, la hora y el lugar en que te va a suceder. Así que vete a un lugar tranquilo y espera. Luego vuelve. Había un lugar donde ir. Podía pedirle a una de mis amigas solteras que pasara la noche. Y su tía no la echaría si era solo por una noche. Puedes inventar una versión convincente para cada uno o no en casa hay problemas con el agua, el gas, la electricidad. Los vecinos están haciendo reformas. Ella está enferma por el olor a pintura. Hay un montón de opciones para elegir. Entonces, ¿por qué se retrasó Sandra? Sergo. No será bienvenido, pero Mary puede cuidarlo por 24 horas. Si quieren. Entonces, ¿qué? ¿Esta es la mariposa de la historia de Ray Bradbury? No puedes interferir con lo que está programado por el destino. Una mariposa aplastada accidentalmente puede cambiar el curso de la historia. Lo más fácil es no creer todo lo que ha pasado en los últimos días. Lo único que puede hacer el teléfono es la Madre de Gloria. Sandra será apoyada en esto por todos menos por Chris. Pero suponiendo que la predicción sea cierta, es insoportable esperar los problemas, y no hacer nada. Sandra tenía planeadas 2 cosas a la vez a casa de su hermano y hablar con Chris. Con August tenían una gran diferencia de edad. Su hermano tiene 2 años y, por supuesto, se considera un adulto. Y está enfadado porque todo se decidió por él en su momento. No quiero vivir con mi tía dijo entonces. Sandra era un desastre medio ciega de tanto olorar y confundida como una niña. ¿Por qué cómo? Era una niña de 18 años, hija de su madre, su favorita, estudiante de primer curso. Le parecía que con la muerte de sus padres todo había terminado para ella. ¿Por qué no se la lavaron con ellos? ¿Por qué no se fue con ellos en aquel coche? ¿Por qué no le gustaba la daca? Why papá y mamá iban a recoger bayas? Hay muchas fresas en la casa de campo. Tía Nelsie. Loraba y vestía de negro, pero nunca perdía de tal. Hizo todos los arreglos en la funeraria y la cantina. Ordenó una cena conmemorativa y pasteles. Se apresuró a organizar el alojamiento. El hermano y la hermana se aferraron el uno al otro, las 2 últimas piezas de la familia rota, pero la tía dijo: Lo siento, Sandra, eres casi una adulta. No te voy a acoger. Te casarás mañana o pasado mañana una familia joven, niños. Es difícil para mí involucrarme en todo eso. Tendré la custodia de August. ¿Qué vas a hacer ahora con él sobre tus hombros? ¿Qué tienes además de tu beca? Estudia mucho, ponte las pilas y tu hermano crecerá conmigo. No te preocupes, no le herdano. Ahora dividiremos el apartamento. Para ser justos, tendrás tu propio lugar. August sostuvo la mano de Sandra todo este tiempo, como si esperara que ella interfiriera en este plan. Y ambos siguieran viviendo en su casa como antes. Excepto que el dormitorio de los padres quedaría vacío. Pero Sandra se dio cuenta de que si no dejaba que sus emociones abrumaran su alma, se apoderaran de ella, su tía tenía razón. El mayor temor de Sandra era que, ocupada en estudiar y practicar, echaría de menos a su hermano. Él dejaría los estudios, se metería en alguna empresa de traspatio, y ella, la hermana, se daría cuenta de demasiado tarde. Dios no lo quiera, los chicos robarían a algún transeúnte tardío o entrarían en un kiosco por la noche, o incluso se volverían adictos a las drogas. Entonces sus padres la maldecirán desde el más allá por no vigilar. Ella es la hermana mayor, así que es culpa suya. Ella tía Nelsie trabajaba como contable en la oficina del distrito, aunque no tenía hijos propios, pero no era ajena al proceso educativo. August, entonces todavía muy joven, no podía decidir nada por sí mismo. Pero el hecho de que su hermana cediera ante su tía, lo tomó como una traición. Y durante mucho tiempo después no quiso hablar con Sandra cuando venía de visita. Solo últimamente se había ablandado un poco, y había algo parecido a la antigua relación entre ellos. Ahora Sandra no quería subir al apartamento de su tía. Llamó a su hermano y lo citó en el patio. Sandra lo vio al salir de la entrada y no pudo apartar los ojos de él. Estaba claro que Augusti llegaría a ser un chico guapo, pero lo más importante era que se parecía tanto a su madre. Se cree que los niños se parecen a sus madres y las niñas a sus padres. Ahora Sandra y August ven el uno en el otro un reflejo de sus padres, que ya no están. ¿Qué haces? Preguntó August acercándose. Sandra legó a mala hora. Normalmente visitaba a su hermano los fines de semana, pero hoy era miércoles. En otras ocasiones Sandra habría bromado al respecto, inventado alguna razón, pero hoy se permitió ser sincera. Ti, echado de menos dijo. No tengo a nadie más que a ti. Soy yo el que no tiene August, aquel de 2 años, nunca había hablado con tanta seriedad. Tienes algún cabrón. Tienes o tendrás tus propios hijos. Yo, mi tía no vi la hora de que termine el 9º grado y me vaya a alguna universidad. Y eso es todo, él es libre. Y yo, el ejercito, luego el resto de mi vida. Tal vez entonces cuando termine de servir y manda a mi tía al infierno no estar solo, pero por ahora. Para asombro de August, su hermana le abrazó con fuerza. Quiso estrechar la cabeza contra su pecho, pero él ya era más alto que ella. Chocaron las frentes. August, lo siento, dijo Sandra. Te quiero igual. Ya lo sabes. ¿Qué haces aquí? Le devolvió la llamada, mientras Sandra se alejaba, a toda prisa, y parecía limpiarse los ojos con las palmas de las manos. Ella se limitó a hacer un gesto con la mano de llame en paz, esforzándose por no romper el horror delante de él. Fue un infierno. Todos se habían puesto de acuerdo para acabar con ella, tanto su marido como sus propios familiares. Gloria colgó el teléfono y soltó una carcajada de esas que hacen que la gente que te rodea corra a buscar sedantes o incluso una camisa de fuerza. Su padre acababa de sorprenderla con la noticia. Su abuela viene a Pennsylvania a visitarla. La anciana solía tener su propio apartamento en invierno y una casa de campo en verano. Le habían dicho que tarde o temprano llegaría a la hora en que tendría que reconocer su edad o mudarse con sus parientes o ingresar en una residencia. Pero era como una tormenta que los meteorólogos prometen para dentro de 3 días. ¿Sí pasaría? O tal vez se sentiría tolerable hasta el final, y iría a Dios desde sus miros natales. Ahora estaba sentada en casa de su hija, y yerno, en una casa que consideraba extraña, y a la que no podía acostumbrarse. Gloria recibió una llamada de su padre. Su voz era culpable. La abuela quiere venir a verte yo. Gloria se quedó boquiabierta. ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué? Ella te crió, su nieta favorita. ¿Why has tanto tiempo que ni siquiera pregunta por ella? Ella dice Gloria se ha olvidado de mí. ¿No vas a venir a nuestra casa, verdad? Bueno, tal vez la abuela es. Por un lado, para agitar las cosas, porque todos sus amigos todavía están donde solía vivir. Y por otro lado, para decir adiós ya es viejo. No importa cómo resulte la vida, tal vez no vuelvan a verse. Gloria se lo imaginaba. La abuela siempre necesita saberlo todo. ¿A dónde ha ido? ¿Por qué? ¿Cuándo volverá? ¿Y por qué tan tarde? Es mejor no hallar pero la mar. ¿Qué has comprado? ¿Qué vas a cocinar? No quiero eso, cocíname esto. Gloria se convertía tanto en una niña pequeña que tenía que informar de cada movimiento como en una sirvienta a la que la abuela Lucia se enseñoreaba. Por un momento, Gloria se sintió realmente igual la pequeña de la familia, a la que no se le ocurría recazar a los mayores. Se compró la puerta mosquitera para poder darle un rincón a su abuela. Vincent Valveria no le debía nada a la anciana. Gloria se imaginó la cara que pondría cuando se enterara de que su mujer había echado a su madre para acoger a su abuela. Porque los jóvenes, que aún estaban programados por la naturaleza para vivir, tenían que adaptarse a alguien cuya edad ya había pasado. De ninguna manera, le dijo Gloria a su padre. Expliquéle a la abuela que no tengo dónde lavarla. Que ni se le ocurra. A su edad, es un camino duro y de gastos, y yo no tengo ni un rincón libre. Y desde el resentimiento con la vida, y con sus familiares, que no entienden nada, y le cargan un problema tras otro, loro directamente al auricular del teléfono. ¿O es burles de mí? ¿Verdad? ¿Estáis todos echando agua sobre mí? ¿Por qué no os compadecéis de mí? Envía a la abuela a casa de Lexi en Londres. Probablemente se divertirá más allí que mi maldita comuna. Y sin escuchar lo que su padre le decía, cortó la conversación y se quedó saludando largo rato en su habitación, cayendo rendida sobre la cama. Sentía que el mundo entero estaba en su contra. Antes de ir a casa de Chris, Sandra tuvo que sacar a pasear a Sergo. El cerdo tenía un arnés especial hecho a medida para pasear, pero era imposible encontrar un collar para su grueso cuello. El cerdo caminaba con aire de negocios, sin fijarse en nadie a su alrededor. Solo le interesaba una cosa: lo que podía comer por el camino. Probaba de todo. Según la estación, joyas de otoño tan joyas, nieve tan nieve. Sergo no miraba a nadie, pero los transeúntes lo miraban invariablemente. Los niños se preguntaban, ¿quién era ese? Los adultos explicaban un cerdito. Y en sus ojos había confusión. ¿Realmente lo vio? Tan alarmada como estaba Sandra, le hizo gracia la niña que cruzó los brazos reverentemente sobre el pecho. Este es el primer cerdo de mi vida. Espera, habrá muchos más, prometió la madre, tirando de su hija. Finalmente, Sergo fue pasado y encerrado en la habitación. Sandra le dio la Ave María. En caso de que el cerdo se despierte y empiece a gritar, se le puede dar de comer, hay comida en la tequila. Lo pasaremos muy bien, prometió Mary. Le leeré algo de poesía. Ocupate tus asuntos en paz, Nina. Cuando Sandra llamó a Chris y le pidió una reunión, le dijo que quería verlo en territorio neutral, en algún café o bar. No puedo soportarlo. Mis manos no deberían temblar. Un joyero necesita movimientos precisos. Y mis dedos tiemblan de miedo como el último el cash. Y si ese es el caso, quiero emborracharme. Necesito que alguien sobrio vigile esto y luego me envíe a casa. ¿Pueden hacerlo? Cumplimos, respondió Chris, y Sandra sintió satisfecha, aunque de momento no podía verle. Y ahora estaban sentados a la mesa de un pequeño café. Una especie de copa a los 7 vientos y Sandra, incluso antes de la conversación entre ellos, 3 grandes tragos de cognac. Ahora voy a dejar ir probablemente, dijo ella, en el interior como si todo está anudado. Ya sabes, detectives no es lo mío, no es mi género, absolutamente no. Somos más de thriller. Chris sacó un pequeño netbook de su bolso. Lo abrió y la página principal de internet se cargó muy rápidamente. Pero Chris solo refunfuno molesto y abrió otro archivo. Sandra quiso inclinarse hacia él en la mesa, pero él había movido su silla y ahora estaba sentado junto a ella. La chica vio un mapa de Pennsylvania, etiquetado con algunos iconos. Estos, dijo Chris, son los casos que conozco. Los que te conté. Porque hay 2 o 3 en algunas casas. Porque ha habido varios suicidios fallidos. Pues al lado las fechas en que ocurrieron. Sandra pidió un deseo. Si este mapa virtual no muestra su patio, o el tipo que fue sacado en Camila, ella lo vio con sus propios ojos, entonces todo es mentira y mitos vacíos. Encontró su patio en el mapa. Había una cruz pintada en la casa vecina. Y la fecha era la misma. Tal vez el teléfono le dijera algo. Chris la miró, de todos modos. ¿En tu casa también hay una cruz? ¿Ves? ¿Te importa si averiguo algo más sobre la historia de tu comuna? Escarbar en su pasado, quien vivía allí antes que tú, si hacían lavado a gente de allí. Sandra asintió, pensando si decirlo o no que el teléfono había perdido su fatídica cita. En lugar de eso, empezó a beber cognac, trago tras trago. Tal vez, cuando todo se desvaneciera ante sus ojos, tendría el valor suficiente para contárselo. Chris cumplió su promesa. Llamó a un taxi, la sujetó por los hombros, llevó a Sandra al coche y se sentó con ella, en el asiento trasero. ¿Estás conmigo? Sonaba sorprendida, con voz inestable. Para ser sincera, la primera vez no consiguió yo decirlo. Tiene que haber alguien que te ayude a subir las escaleras. Se despidieron en la puerta de su apartamento. Mary seguía despierta. Al parecer, había invitado al cerdo a una divertida fiesta. Sandra oyó la voz de la anciana, y un grunhido satisfecho como respuesta. Cuando Sandra entró, Mary estaba sentada en una silla con una bolsa de galletas y Sergo estaba a sus pies esperando impaciente la siguiente tanda de golosinas. Pero eso no fue lo que llamó la atención de Sandra. El armario antiguo que había junto a la puerta estaba entreabierto y había varias cosas colgadas de los hombros. Y entre ellas, dos batas médicas blancas. Mañana. Ese fue el primer pensamiento que había cruzado la mente de Sandra al despertarse todo ocurriera mañana. Oh no, pero ahora podía sentirlo subconscientemente con la columna vertebral. El aire estaba electrificado como antes de una tormenta. Crepitaba. El cerdo que yacía a sus pies resopló en sueños. Dormía como un gato boca arriba, con las pezuñas hacia arriba. Sergo esperaba una mañana tranquila y tortitas. Sandra le hacía tortitas a menudo. Y si tenía suerte con un plátano. Los plátanos eran lo que más le gustaba al cerdo. Sandra le acarició la barriga con dos dedos, con cuidado de no despertarlo. Podía leer sus pensamientos incluso cuando dormía. No debes comer tanto, dijo en voz baja. ¿Te vas a poner como Esther? ¿Sabes algo de ella? Sus dueños la cogieron cuando era yo encerdido, pensando que era una pura sangre que serían 2 gotas de agua. Pero creció y se convirtió en un gran caballo. Quiero decir cerdo. Iba a decir cerdo. En ese momento casi envidió a Sergo hasta las lágrimas. Ella también quería pensar en tortitas y plátanos, en abalorios y bragas, en una playa blanca como la nieve y un mar cálido, donde había estado varias veces en su lejana infancia. Pero en lugar de eso, tiene que averiguar exactamente cómo la van a matar. Porque esta pregunta no se planteó, ya estaba visto. Y ayer, cuando habían hablado con Chris, ellos también cada uno de ellos sabía por qué. Son jóvenes. El cuerpo funciona como un reloj. Y cada parte cuesta dinero. Mucho dinero. Y es tan tentador atrapar a un hombre en tu telaraña como una rana, a una mosca que nadie lo buscara. Sandra sacó su móvil. Lo ponía debajo del colchón por la noche. En el mismo sitio, para que incluso en la oscuridad pudiera buscarlo a tientas en cualquier momento. Tal vez esperaba que con la fuerza de su voluntad pudiera hipnotizar el futuro, cambiarlo. Sandra también sabía que hoy sería la última vez que vería esta página del foro, esta foto. El móvil solo mostraba el futuro, pero no el hoy. Así que miró la foto con triple atención. Queen estaba tumbada en la camilla, ella o Gloria. Ambas tenían el pelo ondulado hasta los hombros. La cara de la mujer de la camilla estaba de espaldas al espectador. ¿Y la sangre? Adivina cuál era. Los camilleros ni siquiera son visibles en la oscuridad, solo batas blancas. Gloria discutió en la cocina. Sandra escuchó y se dio cuenta de que el grifo goteaba, y había un charco en el suelo. Menos mal que Gloria se dio cuenta a tiempo, porque si no los vecinos de abajo habrían venido a darles una paliza. O, como mínimo, les habrían obligado a hacer reparaciones. Gloria abrió la puerta sin llamar y se asomó. Y llamado a un cerrajero. No vendrá hasta mañana. No hay platos en la cocina, solo en el baño. Volvió a tener ese tono de la casera que es dueña de todo el apartamento. Luego se puso en contacto con María y le repitió la misma información. Sandra no había desayunar, no podía probar bocado. Sergo tenía comida seca, suficiente para un día. Dios, tendría que pensar dónde meterlo así. Ninguno de sus amigos se lo llevaría, excepto Chris, Perry son tipo responsable. Como mínimo, pondrá a Sergo al cuidado de una sociedad para cerdos huérfanos. Creo que voy a ponerme a dieta de vino, murmuró Sandra, sirviéndose un vaso lleno de tinto español. La botella lleva mucho tiempo en su tequila, destinada a su cumpleaños. Pero, ¿qué pasa ahora? Preguntó Chris mientras Sandra se servía una segunda copa. He descubierto algo más, dijo. Interesante. Bueno se apresuró a decir Sandra. Vamos a vernos. No como ayer. No hay tiempo para emociones. Tienes que escucharme, entenderlo y recordarlo todo. Sandra se dio cuenta no queer calor en su chaleco, no queer verla como el día anterior, borracha. Tales cosas se informan sobrio. Ya estoy, dijo quiero decir todo. Estoy colocada. Se encontraron en el parque. Sergo, cuya memoria no era peor que la de un perro, inmediatamente gruñó desagradablemente, tono me fuera. Esperaba que Chris, como un viejo conocido, le hubiera traído algo sabroso. Al principio Chris hizo un gesto de culpabilidad con las manos, pero luego rebuscó en su bolsillo un caramelo, que Sergo se comió con deleite. Caminaron despacio por el callejón. Sandra no se interesó por los que miraban al cerdo. En general, en su habitación antes de borracho, vivía un chico joven, dijo Chris, no por mucho tiempo, menos de un año. ¿Puedes adivinar lo que le pasó? Sandra contuvo la respiración. La cosa se puso fea para él. Pero cuando los paramédicos lo sacaron del apartamento, el tipo tenía un aspecto bastante decente. Solo que en la camilla yacía muy pálido y completamente fuera de sí. Nuestros nuevos conocidos después de todo, un montón de diversión. Ellos vienen con diferentes formas de suicidio. Los camaleros en el patio dijeron que el chico había tomado algunas pastillas. No lo creo, es más probable que algún tipo de inyección de acción rápida. Una cosa que sé es que tu anciana favorita estaba en casa en ese momento. Ella les abrió la puerta. Probablemente se cambiaron de ropa. En su casa, dijo Sandra pensativa. En las otras casas, las que están en mi mapa. Ali también es la misma historia. Cuando los jóvenes se iban, alguien temporal se instalaba en las habitaciones. Alguien que no duraría mucho. Un viajante de León, un alcohólico, ese tipo de cosas. Era una especie de relleno para no llamar la atención. Para que nadie se preguntara qué clase de apartamento infeliz era, que los suicidios en el uno tras otro. Aquí el diente de león de Dios salió al mundo muy tranquilo, de acuerdo con todas las reglas y el funeral fue con un velatorio. ¿Puede alguien ayudarnos? Para Sandra, esa fue la pregunta que decidió su destino. Bueno, quiero decir, ¿tenemos pruebas suficientes para ir a la policía con todo esto? ¿Me estás tomando el pelo? Y no me mires con esperanza. No tengo un investigador que conozca. Un investigador sensible que vaya a entrar y reventar todo este sistema. Porque es un sistema, estoy segura. Así que ya está, resumió Sandra, bajando la cabeza. Aunque ella se muda ahora, al cual yo empiezo en otro sitio solo dime. En que el sistema solo se detendrá un poco. Luego, a la arana teguera su tela. Alguien más irá a desmantelar. No conozco a ningún operativo, dijo Chris, pero conozco a un gangster. Cierto, en el pasado. Pero eso, como se suele decir, no se olvida. Nunca se olvida, podrías esperar. Observar. Reunir datos, pero no puedes, mañana tengo que salvarte. Si, mañana no saldrás de casa, ya que probablemente alguien esté vigilando. Estés dentro o fuera. Probablemente si tú me espiando. O es una vieja tramposa. Sí, como decís, ha vivido aquí toda su vida. Ha visto muchas cosas. Estoy seguro de que hubo más que este tipo que se lavaron. Antes de él. No he profundizado lo suficiente. Sandra called the cafe, ordered a vegetable funchosa and a fish burger. Ever since she had Sergo, she couldn't eat pork. They promised to bring everything in an hour, but the courier showed up early. A young guy with an intelligent face. Probably also a student who had found a part-time job. Sandra paid, but the courier was in no hurry. Probably he didn't want to go out in the cold rain either. The girl did not invite him in. He stood in the stairwell, but looked somewhere in the depths of the apartment. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. "Why?"
Probably recently. concluded the guy, alone or...
Everything became clear. He just wanted to get acquainted. Though Sandra stood before him in amateur-like form. Sweatpants, plaid shirt, hands in paint while waiting for food sketching, on her face tired and not a gram of makeup. Not alone, Sandra said to get out of it.
She was telling the truth, by the way. If you mean Sergo.
That's good, the boy nodded. You shouldn't live alone in this house. Just then he finally left. Sandra shrugged and for almost the first time locked the door, besides the lock, with a chain, and hurried to her room. She had a deliciously unusual meal. Sandra thought that someday life would change, she would become rich and be able to travel to different countries. Taste other people's cuisine. Taste is one of the 5 human senses, no less important than smell or touch. The richness of the senses was what Sandra wanted to live for. The next day Sandra took the subway to Ladoshkaya to see a client. She was collecting brooches in the form of flowers, and the lily of the valley was meant for her. The brooch turned out to be very beautiful, but the client will never pin it on her dress, will not go out in public. The jewelry will lie in a special box, divided into cells. Like a cell, like a prison. Sandra once again reproached herself for endowing inanimate things with human emotions. You can't do that, or you'll be in pain all your life, like the little mermaid when she walked on knives. You will begin to pity every autumn leaf that falls from the branch, every escalator step, making its endless run. Speaking of the escalator, when Sandra was very young, she thought the subway was all that. And if you forget to get off at the terminus, the train will also flatten out in the dark tunnel, like steps, and when it's about to go back on, it will take its former shape. That's how stupid she was. At the stop ahead of Sandra, the carriage was almost empty. The passengers got off. The girl thought that she would not get on anyway now to get off. Still, she glanced around the seats. That's when she saw the phone forgotten by someone. Black, no case. At the other end of the car sat an elderly couple, another girl in a bright pink sequin jacket staring at her cell phone. It was clear that it was useless to ask these 3 if they were missing. Sandra picked up her cell phone. She wanted to look up the numbers, see if she could get through to someone. Then she would say she had found the item and was ready to give it back, but the phone demanded a password. What was she supposed to do? Give it to the station attendant. If the lost person would look for the cell phone, maybe he would know who to ask. Getting off the train, Sandra hesitated, even though there was no time left. The client was expecting her by noon. It had never occurred to Sandra to keep her cell phone, even though her own was breathing. Everyone around her was in a hurry, and Sandra was out of the picture. She was on the table, and the flow of people flowed around her from both sides. Did something happen to you? A man's voice asked her. It sounded familiar to Sandra. She had a very bad memory for faces, but she recognized this guy. He was the one who had brought the food from the cafe yesterday, the delivery guy. Here she showed him her phone. I found it, but I can't crack the password, so I don't know who to return it to. I know how, he said. Give me, I'll do. Strange model, I'd never seen it before. Well, okay, I can't figure it out myself. A friend will help. He's an expert. A regular phone hacker? I go higher. He can open anything from the most sophisticated safes. Then I'm cool. Sandra handed over the phone and nodded, saying goodbye. Now she didn't have to go, she had to run. It seemed that the guy had something else to say to her, but Sandra had no time, really no time. Still, she thought about the young man for a few minutes while the endless escalator carried her upstairs. Somehow she was sure she would see him again. And she was right. A little over 24 hours passed, and in the evening, late evening, when decent people had already gone to bed, he rang the doorbell of her communal room. Sandra heard the bell. She was sitting in her room drawing. Vincent opened the door. A short conversation in the hallway. Then Valia went to her room, and there was a knock. "Where did you get that cell phone?" the courier asked. He was too excited and forgot to say hello. "I told you I found it." "This can't be." "Do you know what this thing is?" "Come in," Sandra said. "Come to my room and tell me everything." Sandra's room was a creative mess. Gloria had lived in it all her childhood, and if she saw it again, she would have howled. Sandra maneuvered between the easel, the stool on which the paint cans were arranged, between the nightstand, the table, and the bed. She navigated this narrow channel masterfully, without bumping into anything. Her guest stumbled over everything. The small room had high ceilings. Sandra often wished people could fly. How much space she would have then. She flew up at the threshold and dropped straight down onto the bed. Sergo was sleeping on the bed. There was no canine wariness in him. He didn't care that people had entered the room. So he slept, turned to the wall with his nickel, to the guest with his curled tail. The guest blinked a lot. Probably thought he was hallucinating. Where would you find a live pig in the middle of Pennsylvania Ambery? And in bed? Do you work for the circus? The guest asked. I make brooches, Sandra said dryly. Sit down. She sat down on a stilted stool, where she did not dare to seat the guest. He had to lower himself onto the bed and feel Sergo's warmth in his lower back. What did you want to tell me? Sandra said hurriedly. Does this phone belong to someone important? But what was such a person doing in the subway riding with mere mortals? It's hard to believe. Or is it a gangster's cell phone? Or is it not a cell phone at all? It is a phone, said the guy, but I don't know what kind of person it could belong to. And yes, my name is Chris. Sandra hadn't asked his name before. Why? He would be gone in a few minutes and they wouldn't see each other again. Look, Chris said. He turned on his cell phone. The blue background lit up, pressing C. The contact list is empty. No one's called lately. There's no incoming or outgoing calls. Nothing. But there's internet on the phone. I can see that you don't understand, because it's just the way things are. ... Nowadays, everyone lives with their nose in their smartphones. But yesterday, when I cracked the password, I opened the Google homepage. I thought maybe I'd get lucky with my email. But I saw the news. I read the news on Google too. What kind of news do you read? Chris' voice had a slight irritation and impatience in it at the same time. Here, look. I'm opening it. Look carefully. Do you see anything unusual? Sandra looked honestly. It's just a normal Google page in the mobile version. What's wrong? Look at the date, Chris said quietly. But it's... Sandra looked up at him. It's tomorrow. Is it a typo? A glitch in the system? It's not a glitch. That's how all the news sites work on this cell phone. You can set any upcoming date on the calendar and see what events are coming up. It must be some kind of trick. A program, like a game. I wish. Yesterday when I cracked the password, I spent the whole evening with this phone. There was a front page story about an accident on the M5. 15 cars, casualties. I wanted to read more about it on my laptop. But it wasn't like that. Peace and quiet. Then I turned on my cell phone again, and I was already paying attention to the date. It was inexplicable. I thought it was a system failure too, and went to bed. And the next morning the accident was all over the news. I was electrocuted. Chris said the last words quietly. Sandra was so confused that she couldn't find anything to say. So they sat there in silence. And today, until tonight, I was, so to speak, testing the phone. Testing its capabilities. It won't tell you what's going to happen in 100 years, but it will tell you what's going to happen this year. You can read it for yourself. You can Google it. You can Rambler it. You can read it in the electronic versions of newspapers. Are you going to tell anyone you found him? Because if it's true, you've got a priceless item. I'm not going to show it to anyone, and it's not mine. Take it. Chris put the cell phone in Sandra's hand. You found it. I think these things choose who they come to. But I couldn't have done anything with it without you. I'd still have it sitting there dead, or I'd have thrown it away. Yeah, why don't we call it a you? I agree. But you should take it. You need it more. Why? And yesterday you were talking some kind of riddle about our house. Can you tell me? I don't want to scare you. I hate that phrase. Sandra exploded. It's everywhere. Your symptoms are not good. I don't want to scare you. But if you don't do this, I don't want to scare you. But something will happen. Can't you just tell me the human part instead of the fog? I want to know. After I lost my mom and dad, I'm not scared of anything. When you said you didn't live alone, did you mean him? Chris jabbed his finger at the pig. Sergo grunted in his sleep. It was clear enough as it was. I'll tell you what I know, Chris said. I know very little, but I don't like it. And in my opinion, you need to be very careful. ... All right. Listen. ... Anyway, I'm learning. Surprised. Sandra grinned. I'm studying to be a historian and I have a hobby. I look for everything unusual and interesting about this city. Its secrets and mysteries. It's the same thing, said Sandra. No, Chris objected. Here's a simple example. If two people keep something from the third, it's their secret. And if all three don't know something, it's their secret. So I came up with suicide. I know of 24 houses, maybe more, where young people have tried to commit suicide. So it's all over the place now. Everybody's depressed. Not enough sun. Lots of rain. No confidence in the future. Chris was either trying to convince her of something or just talking out loud. But none of the people I'm talking about went out the window, took a pill. Usually it was a rope or a razor. And each time, an ambulance would arrive surprisingly quickly, picking up the clients still alive. And everything ended with a faceless death certificate, that's all. However, nobody got involved in this story, did not dig deep. None of these guys had any close relatives. You think this was about housing? So someone could get their square footage? Sandra was suddenly scared. But why did only young people commit suicide? Not a single old man or woman. And after all, old people also often have depression. But the most interesting thing is that in all these cases, the ambulance is as if waiting outside the door. It came right away and always took them away. You probably know how you have to wait for an ambulance, sometimes for hours. And if a person has to be taken to the hospital, neighbors who are stronger are called to help. Because young girls or paramedics come, they can't lift the patient themselves, they can't carry him. And for these calls, there was always a brigade, 2 or 3 shouldered men. How did you dig all this up? These are not some interesting historical facts. Why did you take it up in the first place? By chance, Chris admitted, really. By pure chance. On one of the forums got a message say, my neighbor, a young girl yesterday ambulance took away, came with a whistle. And when we called for a sick child, 2 hours could not wait, but there really was a hard case. Luba later died in the hospital. And most importantly, the day before, it was not noticeable that she was going to lose her temper. She was cheerful, joking with us. I was hooked by this story. I couldn't forget it. Then I heard a conversation on a bus. There was also a woman talking about her neighbor. The guy had opened his veins. The ambulance came immediately, even though no one had called it. And the kid never came home. And when I started looking for similar stories, it turned out that there are plenty of them. And young people were taken away from certain homes, as if they were obliged to pay such a terrible tribute. It was not conspicuous. There are enough people, especially in high-rise buildings. You need to know something. Be alert to not miss another case. And yes, your house is under attack too. Now Sandra realized why Chris had been so insistent in asking whether she lived alone or with someone. And he was kind of relieved to know she had someone. True, he couldn't think it was Sergo. But it's a communal apartment. No outsider can come in here. They'll notice him right away. So I think there's nothing to worry about here. Nothing to threaten. There have been cases, Chris said briefly, so let's not argue, and I'll leave the phone with you. Maybe it will save you, warn you somehow. Just don't forget to watch the news for the next few days. Gloria sat on the internet and wrote a message in a chat room. She had been logging in for a long time. She was already an old-timer. This chat room was like her own. Now she was composing the text advised, please, how to persuade the neighbor to sell us the room next door. She was born in it. She doesn't want to leave on any terms, neither another room, nor a green neighborhood, nothing. An old grandmother, over 80, no family, no children. No grandchildren, no husband. And the neighbor understands perfectly well that we, with a small child, will be cramped. She is such a nuisance. What to do? Vincent came home from work. Gloria barely had time to send her message. She ran out to warm up dinner. There it was, the act of love. The smell of buckwheat made her sick, and Gloria turned away from the cutlets so she wouldn't see them. But Vincent liked a good meal, so she had to make it work. Gloria didn't have any money of her own. It all came through her husband's hands. You had to please. Today, however, Vincent was unusually restrained. He ate the over-salted soup in silence, then reached for the second. What's wrong? Gloria asked. My mother is going to visit, he answered after a short pause. Gloria knew her husband had only one mother, living in a remote province, somewhere near Samara. What would she do in Pennsylvania? The unspoken question hung in the air. Vincent understood. She wants to see me. I haven't seen her in a couple of years. She's going to get so much country food, it's going to fill the fridge. How long is she staying? Gloria asked cautiously. On the one hand, it's good to have relatives who live far away. On the other hand, if they came to visit, it wouldn't take long to get rid of them. They'd be gone for at least a few days. Vincent confirmed Gloria's hunch. A week, he said. She can't be away from the farm for too long. Where will she sleep? They had a double bed made up of 2 twin beds. Gloria thought they could put a cot for her mother-in-law in the kitchen, to keep some comfort for herself and her husband for the week. Better yet, rent a room in a cheap hotel. Let mother and son meet on neutral territory. We'll split the beds. Vincent must have thought of everything. You'll sleep on one bed and Mom on the other. She has a bad back. She needs comfort. I can sleep on the floor. It's clear. The house will turn into a gypsy camp. Can't your mom go to a hotel? Gloria asked. She'd be more comfortable there. You see, she's a country woman. She has her own ideas. She'll be offended that I didn't take her in, that I couldn't find a place for her. My place Gloria wanted to correct, but held back, only biting her lip. How they could use a second room right now. No, something must be done about the neighbors. At night, Sandra woke up to colored lights wandering around the room like flashes. She had been sleeping lightly, and that was enough. Sandra went to the window and Sergo followed her. Decided that the landlady might be making a turn to the refrigerator. The pig could eat at any time of day. It rattled behind his ears. The window of Sandra's room looked out onto the courtyard, a bleak, bare courtyard. All around were houses painted yellow. Remark he could have lived here. Night had hidden the squalor of the courtyard. Now every shadow seemed mysterious. An ambulance was parked in the driveway, and 2 men in white coats were loading a stretcher into it. Sandra saw the face of a guy in his early 20s. It was dead pale. Sandra had a liquor bottle in her closet. It was now filled with sedative drops, 5 different kinds. Sandra poured in half a cup of water and generously refilled it with what was supposed to be measured out in drops. It was the cognac version of relaxation. She drank because her heart was beating so hard against her ribs that it felt like it might wake up the neighbors. Like a big clock with a pendulum beating in the middle of the night. Sandra remembered once there was such a clock at home, but besides the pendulum it had a cuckoo. Mom had been sold this rarity by an acquaintance. Poor Mom, she wanted so much to have a home that was no worse than people's, but she was always short of money. And she didn't trust her taste because she grew up poor. She didn't even throw away broken things and old clothes. They could be repaired and mended. But she instinctively realized that her friends would condescend to despise her for this. That's why she always took, if acquaintances gave her something or sold it for nothing from their own, worn unfashionable. But once they chose all this, so the things are good. Did your mother ever wear a dress that she liked in the store? Not because of its price, but simply because your mother thought it was beautiful. When her parents added up their paychecks, there was barely enough for life, and for their 2 children, Sandra and her younger brother, Augusta. Now Sandra was earning enough, but what could she buy her father and mother? Only a beautiful monument. The ambulance had long since left. Sandra lay in bed, covered with a blanket with her head. It seemed to her from her childhood that it was safer this way. This way nothing bad could happen to her. The monument. It was chosen and placed by her aunt, her mother's sister. She also took August to her. It was a complicated exchange. Parents' 3-room and 1-room aunt exchanged for a 2-room apartment for the aunt, who took custody of August, and a room for Sandra. The girl agreed immediately, having learned that we'll live among the legendary antiquities. And now look out the window at the dreary yellow walls with sweat and a yard where not a single blade of grass grows. Tolerate Gloria's neighborhood with Valia and clean the whole apartment. Even when her neighbors didn't say a single word to her, Sandra could feel the poisonous vibes coming from them. It's hard to be around people who want you gone more than anything in the world. There were 2 choices. The first was to retreat. She wouldn't be left without a place to live. Even people like her neighbors wouldn't think of that. For her room, Sandra could get a separate apartment somewhere on the outskirts to close the door behind her and no shared kitchens and baths. But will not be for many years, then sharpen the humiliation that she so easily surrendered under the pressure of boorish people, provided them with conditions. The second option is to fight, put Sergo in good hands, so as not to give the neighbors trumps. The pig is a thoroughbred. He has international documents. He can go abroad, unlike Sandra. She doesn't have a passport. What happens next? Gloria and Valia will take Mary's room. It will happen sooner or later, even if we have to wait until the old lady is gone. The neighbors will spread out in a pancake to get those meters. And Sandra will be alone in a hostel camp. She'll come home and feel how much everyone hates her. We'll have to hold up in her room because Sandra will never learn how to scandalize. She doesn't have that scandal gene in her internal program, and there's nowhere for it to come from. Sergo sensed his mistress's mood. He clucked his hooves on the parquet, made tinkling, clattering sounds, and began to look anxiously into her face. As if he were a dog and understood everything, the mother-in-law arrived. I mean, what's the big deal about putting up with a man for a week? Gloria wondered why she was treating this rather short visit as a disaster, as if she were a cat and would be stroked against her fur for a week. But a cat can escape to the attic, to the basement, and find another cat, even better than the one left at home. But Gloria can't go anywhere. There's nowhere to go. Her mother-in-law is a gaunt little woman. Vincent met her at the train station, loaded her bags into the car. But where the mother-in-law came from, she had to carry them to the train. How could she do that? The bags took up half the kitchen. 3-liter jars with pickles, honey, lard, and even a duck carcass yellow from fat. There was enough food now to last a month. Gloria was afraid that her mother-in-law had changed her plans and would stay for 4 weeks instead of 1. And she realized that she would never be Amber's. Aunt Amber's she couldn't call her mother daughter-in-law, her own daughter. Gloria had prepared a full dinner for her guest's arrival. She poured mushroom soup. There was no salt on the table. Vincent went to the kitchen and got some. Her mother-in-law tightened her lips. Gloria served the second course, collected the dirty plates. As she walked out the door, she heard it. A good hostess doesn't sit down if there's nothing on the table. And her husband doesn't run out for salt. Your father didn't know where my dishes were. The relationship is fixed once and for all. Gloria couldn't please her mother-in-law no matter how hard she tried. She decided not to try at all. Once again, she had to say a bad word about her neighbors, who were unable to disappear into thin air to free up the space their family needed. Gloria went to the store. She bought a screen Chinese brightly colored birds on a black background. Vincent had already dismembered the twin bed, and there were narrow bunks along the walls. Gloria fenced off her own. It was better on one side. It gave the illusion of privacy, lying on the phone with her legs up high. Gloria's feet got swollen with the pregnancy. On the other hand, it felt as if the room belonged to her mother-in-law and her son, and she, Gloria, was superfluous, tucked away in a corner, in her kennel. Why had Amber come? Gloria wondered. They used to go to the big cities to buy things they couldn't find in the country. They'd make a list on more than one sheet of paper, including relatives and acquaintances. But now you can buy everything everywhere. And my mother-in-law didn't want to go shopping. Gloria didn't realize it right away. Amber had traveled far away to see how her son was doing. Adjust his life to what she thought was right. Learn to bake, she said to Gloria. You don't go near the oven, but you should ... Pies are so helpful. When I raised my boys, I always had a plate of pies on the table. With potatoes, with cabbage, with whatever was cheapest, even with liver sausage. And my boys never went hungry, cheap and hearty. You have meat on the table every day. That's a lot of money for food. And Valia is the only one who earns money. A week, Gloria repeated to herself every night, just a week. And another day has already passed. Vincent told her that he had bought his mother a return train ticket. Gloria cheered up and promised herself to stay in the frame for the remainder of the week. But good intentions, as you know, ... Gloria tried to minimize conversations with her mother-in-law, but the latter, as if not noticing her daughter-in-law's dislike, asked in detail. And who washes the latrines here? One by one, Gloria answered monosyllabically. It's not your turn. It's that girl with the mop. She's young. It's not hard for her. And she's not pregnant, by the way. Why do you pay her money if she's got it all on her own? Scrubbing like hell. No, I'm gonna give her a kick in the ass so she's out to here. I'll give you another kick to shut her up, Gloria wanted to say, but she kept silent like a partisan under interrogation. Her patience had run out suddenly. The only automatic washing machine in the apartment belonged to Gloria. She had rushed to buy it, and it had taken the best place in the bathroom. No other machine would fit there now. Whether Sandra and Mary washed their clothes in basins or in the laundry room was of no interest to Gloria, and it certainly wouldn't have occurred to any of her neighbors to ask permission to do their laundry in someone else's machine. So the pile of laundry that appeared on the washing machine was not doubtful of its belonging. Besides, Gloria had seen that yellow sweater on her mother-in-law, and the pantaloons were clearly hers too. It would seem that take 2 fingers, stick them in the machine, pour the powder, turn on the program, and that's it. It's the husband's mother. She's leaving in 2 days. But Gloria felt a 9th wave of irritation, even hatred. She did not want to touch this old woman's clothes, to take them in her hands, to inhale the odor of her dirty body. She wanted to get even somehow for a week of living with her mouth closed, with her mouth taped shut and unable to say what she thought. She shoved the old woman's clothes into the dirtiest corner of the tub with her foot and stomped on them. She put her bedding in the machine. Before her husband came, she hung up snow-white sheets and duvet covers, fragrant with perfume. My mother-in-law saw that her goods were left unwashed. She went to the bathroom to check. When she came back, her lips were pressed together. When Vincent arrived, Gloria was supposed to serve dinner. But she hesitated. She wanted to walk quietly out of the kitchen, to go to the door and hear what her grandmother was saying. Gloria had no doubt that she would complain. But she'd underestimated Amber's outrage. She didn't even want to hide. When Gloria set a plate of cutlets and mashed potatoes in front of each of them, her mother-in-law asked, her chin upturned, addressing only her son, as if her daughter-in-law weren't even here. "Why didn't your wife wash my clothes?" Vincent was hungry and didn't feel like arguing. "She must be tired," he said diplomatically, wielding his fork.
She lies on the bed all day. His mother-in-law wanted to summarize the week's observations, and she spits at the ceiling. And it's hard for her to start the laundry. Why?
That's where Gloria went off on a tangent. "Because I'm not a laundress," she said with a smile that could outshine the sun. So much of it was fiery hatred. "Because your son and you live in my house, and if you expect it, someone else can please you, but not me." The mother-in-law gasped with indignation and the urge to reply. Her jaws set, and then one of them moved out of its usual place. My mother-in-law had the cheapest prosthesis made at the district hospital, and it couldn't take the emotion. I had to run to the bathroom to fix it. It was an added humiliation. Gloria went out to calm down and make tea. When she returned, Vincent was helping his mother pack. There wasn't much. His mother-in-law had brought the goodies in large bags, her own clothes in one small one. The dirty laundry was put in a bag. "Where are you going?" Gloria asked, emphasizing the you. She wasn't interested in where her mother-in-law was going. And to an acquaintance, Vincent answered dryly. He'd taken his mother away and hadn't come home for the night. But Gloria knew it was only temporary. Where would he go? A stamp in his passport, a roof over his head, and a sun on the horizon. He'll come back like a sweetheart. He'll only stay with the old woman until he puts her on the train to show her he's with her. And then he'll come. Sandra and Mary hardly noticed that a stranger was living in the apartment. They had been drawn into their rooms before, like a snail drawn into its shell. The loud-voiced, perpetually disgruntled Gloria filled all the space in the apartment, and they didn't want to cross paths with her. Sandra sat on the bed, stroking Sergo, covered with a plaid blanket, scratching his neck. But her thoughts wandered far away. She realized that such an incident as a suicide attempt in a single house was unlikely to make it to the major news sites. So now she just went from one social network to another, scrolling through community news, looking a day, 2, 3 ahead. She realized that this work could be endless and even fruitless, and it was even more likely that that was the case. But what a strange feeling it was to learn what no one else knew. It's hard to be God, and even to carry a tiny spark to be a visionary is also very hard. You can see who will win a soccer match, which politician will have a career crash, but Sandra was not interested in any of that. Suddenly she flinched and blinked a lot. She had this habit of blinking, as if everything unpleasant would dissipate by itself, if only she blinked and then took a closer look. Going home today. She read on the forum, the first hour of the night I see, and we in the yard ambulance stands. A girl is taken out. Her head was smashed. Her hair was in crow V. They took her out so quickly. I wanted to come up and ask what happened, but they loaded her right away and drove away, with flashers. Underneath the message was a photo, apparently taken hastily on a phone. Sandra blinked one last time. Nothing had changed. It was their driveway, familiar graffiti. And on the stretcher, yes, it looked like it was her. She was covered with something, but that bloody hair. Can fate be changed? Or will it still lead you to the snake, like Oleg the prophet? Try to climb or fold your paws on your chest, let it be as it will be.
Sandra glanced at the date. It would happen in 5 days.
So she only had 5 days. You know the day, the hour and the place when it's going to happen to you. So you go somewhere quiet and wait it out. Then come back. There was a place to go. I could ask one of my single friends to spend the night. And her aunt wouldn't kick her out if it was just for one night. You can come up with a convincing version for everyone at home: problems with water, gas, electricity. Neighbors are renovating. She's sick from the smell of paint. There's plenty of options to choose from. So why was Sandra being held back? Sergo. He won't be welcome, but Mary can look after him for 24 hours. They love each other. So what? Is this the butterfly from Ray Bradbury's story? You can't interfere with what's programmed by fate. An accidentally squashed butterfly can change the course of history. The easiest thing to do is not to believe everything that has happened in the last few days. All the phone can do is Gloria's mother. Sandra will be supported in this by everyone except Chris. But assuming that the prediction is true, it is unbearable to wait for trouble and do nothing. Sandra had 2 things planned for herself at once: to go to her brother's house and to talk to Chris. With August, they had a big age difference. His brother is 12, and of course he considers himself an adult, and he's angry that everything was decided for him at the time. "I don't want to live with my aunt," he said at the time. Sandra was a mess, half blind from crying and confused as a child. Why like? She was an 18-year-old child, her mother's daughter, her favorite, a first-year student. It seemed to her that with the death of her parents, everything was over for her. Why didn't they take her with them? Why didn't she go with them in that car? Because she didn't like the dacha, and Dad and Mom were supposed to pick berries. There's a lot of strawberries at the cottage. Aunt Nelsie. She cried and wore black, but she never missed a detail. She made all the arrangements at the funeral home and the canteen, ordered a memorial dinner and pies. She was just as quick to make arrangements for housing. The brother and sister clung to each other, the last 2 pieces of the broken family, but the aunt said, "Sorry, Sandra, you're almost an adult. I'm not taking you in. You'll get married tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, a young family, children. It's hard for me to get involved in all that. I'll get custody of August. What are you going to do with him on your shoulders now? What do you have besides your scholarship? Study hard, get on your feet, and your brother will grow up with me. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I won't hurt you. We'll divide the apartment now. In fairness, you'll have your own place." August held Sandra's hand all this time, as if he hoped that she would interfere with this plan, and they would both remain living in their home as before, except that the parents' bedroom would be empty. But Sandra realized that if she didn't let her emotions overwhelm her soul, take over her aunt was right. Sandra's greatest fear was that, busy with studying and practicing, she would miss her brother. He would drop out of school, get involved with some backyard company, and she, the sister, would notice everything too late. God forbid the boys will rob some late passerby or break into a kiosk at night, or even get addicted to drugs. Then her parents will curse her from beyond the grave for not watching out. She's the big sister, so it's her fault. Aunt Nelsie worked as an accountant in the district office, although she had no children of her own, but she was no stranger to the educational process. August, then still very young, could not decide anything on his own. But the fact that his sister yielded to his aunt, he took it as a betrayal. And for a long time after that, he didn't want to talk to Sandra when she came to visit. Only lately he had softened a little, and there was something like the old relationship between them. Now Sandra didn't want to go up to her aunt's apartment. She called her brother and summoned him to the yard. Sandra saw him as he came out of the driveway and couldn't take her eyes off him. It was clear that August would grow up to be a handsome boy, but the main thing was that he looked so much like his mother. It is believed that boys resemble their mothers and girls resemble their fathers. Now Sandra and August see in each other a reflection of their parents, who are no longer there. "What are you doing?" August asked, approaching. Sandra arrived at a bad hour. Usually she visited her brother on weekends, but today was Wednesday. At other times Sandra would have joked about it, made up some reason, but today she allowed herself to be truthful. "I just missed you," she said. I don't have anyone else but you. I'm the one who doesn't. August, that 12-year-old boy, had never spoken so earnestly. You've got some bastard. You have or you'll have. You'll have kids of your own. And me. My aunt can't wait for me to finish 9th grade and slip away to some college. And that's it. She's free. And me? The army. Then the rest of my life. Maybe then, when I'm done serving and send my aunt to hell, I won't be alone. But for now. To Avgut's amazement, his sister hugged him tightly. She wanted to hold his head against her chest, but he was already taller than her. They bumped foreheads. August, I'm sorry, said Sandra. I love you anyway, you know that. What are you doing here? He called her back, as Sandra was hurrying away and seemed to be wiping her eyes with the palms of her hands. She just waved her hand, leave me alone, trying hard not to burst into tears in front of him. It was a hell of a thing. Everyone had agreed to finish her off, both her husband and her own relatives. Gloria put down the phone and laughed the kind of laugh that makes people around you run for sedatives, or even a straitjacket. Her father had just shocked her with the news. Her grandmother is coming to Pennsylvania to visit her. The old woman used to have her own apartment in the winter and a cottage in the summer. She had been told that sooner or later the hour would come when she would have to recognize her age and move in with her relatives or move into a nursing home. But it was like a thunderstorm that the weather forecasters promise in 3 days. Would it blow over? Or maybe she would feel tolerable to the end and go to God from her native walls. Now she sat at her daughter and son-in-law's house, in a house she considered a stranger, and to which she could not get used. Gloria received a call from her father. His voice was guilty. "Grandma wants to come to see you," he said. Gloria was dumbfounded. "Why?" "She raised you, her favorite granddaughter. And you haven't even asked about her in so long. She says, Gloria's forgotten all about me, you're not coming to our house, are you?" Well, maybe Grandma is. On the one hand, to shake things up, because all her friends are still where she used to live. And on the other hand, to say goodbye, it's already old. No matter how life will turn out, maybe you won't see each other again. Gloria imagined it. Grandma always needs to know everything. Where did she go? Why? When will you be back? And why so late? It's better not to go, but to call. What did you buy? What are you going to cook? I don't want that. Cook me this. Gloria would turn into both a little child who had to report every move and a servant whom Grandma Lucia would lord it over. For a moment, Gloria really felt the same, the youngest in the family, who could not even think of refusing the elders. The screen door was bought so she could give her grandmother a corner. Vincent would be back, he didn't know the old woman anything. Gloria imagined the look on his face when he found out his wife had kicked his mother out to take in her grandmother. Why should they, the young, who were still programmed by nature to live, have to adjust themselves to someone whose age was up? "No way," Gloria said to her father. "Explain to Grandma that I have no place to take her. Let her not even think about it. At her age, it's a hard road and expenses, and I don't even have a free corner." And from resentment at life, and at her relatives, who do not understand anything, and take on her one problem after another, she cried directly into the telephone receiver. "You're mocking me, aren't you? Are you all making water over me? Why don't you feel sorry for me? Send Grandma to Lexi's in London. She'll probably have more fun there than in my fucking commune." And not listening to what her father was saying to her, she cut the conversation short, and then sobbed for a long time in her room, falling flat on her bed. She felt like the whole world was against her. Before going to Chris's, Sandra had to take Sergo for a walk. The pig had a special harness made to order for walking, but it was impossible to find a collar for his thick neck. The pig was walking in a businesslike manner, not noticing anyone around him. He was interested in one thing: what he could eat on the way. He tasted everything, depending on the season: autumn leaves, so leaves, snow, snow. Sergo did not look at anyone, but passers-by invariably looked at him. Children wondered who was that. Adults explained a piglet. And in their eyes there was confusion: do I really see it? As alarmed as Sandra was, she was amused by the girl who folded her arms reverently on her chest. "This is the first pig in my life. Wait, there will be many more," the mother promised, pulling her daughter along with her. Finally, Sergo was walked and locked in the room. Sandra gave the key to Mary. In case the pig wakes up and starts yelling, he can be fed. Food is in the locker. "We'll have a wonderful time," Mary promised. "I'll read him some poetry." Go about your business in peace, child." When Sandra called Chris and asked for a meeting, she said she wanted to see him on neutral territory somewhere in a cafe or a bar. "I can't take it. My hands shouldn't be shaking. A jeweler needs precise movements. And my fingers are shaking with fear like the last Al-Kash. And if that's the case, I want to get drunk. I need someone sober to keep an eye on this, and then send me home. Can you do that?" "No, we'll deliver," Chris replied, and Sandra nodded in satisfaction, even though she couldn't see him at the moment. And now they were sitting at a table in a small cafe, a kind of glass on the 7 winds, and Sandra, even before the conversation between them, 3 big gulps of cognac. "Now I will let go, probably," she said, inside as if everything is knotted. "You know, detectives, it's not my thing. Not my genre. Absolutely not." "We're more of a thriller." Chris pulled a small netbook out of his bag, opened it, and the homepage of the internet loaded very quickly. But Chris only grumbled annoyingly and opened another file. Sandra wanted to bend over the table to him, but he had moved his chair and was now sitting next to her. The girl saw a map of Pennsylvania, labeled with some icons. "These," Chris said, "the cases I know, the ones I told you about." "Why are there 2 or 3 on some houses?" "Because there have been a number of failed suicides there. I put the dates next to them when they happened." Sandra made a wish. If this virtual map doesn't show her yard, or the guy who was carried out on a stretcher, she saw it with her own eyes, then it's all bullshit and empty fears. She found her yard on the map. There was a cross painted on the neighboring house, and the date was the same date. Maybe the phone will tell you something. Chris looked up at her anyway. "There's a cross on your house too, see? Do you mind if I find out more about the history of your commune? Dig into its past, who lived there before you, whether people have been taken from it." Sandra nodded, pondering whether or not to tell him that the phone had predicted her fateful date. Instead, she began to drink cognac shot after shot. Maybe when everything swam in front of her eyes, she'd be brave enough to tell him. ... Chris kept his promise. Calling a cab, supporting her by the shoulders, he took Sandra to the car and sat in the back seat with her. "Are you with me?" She sounded surprised, her voice unsteady. To be honest, she didn't manage to say it at all the first time. "There must be someone to help you up the stairs." They said goodbye at the door of her apartment. Mary was still awake. Apparently, she had invited the pig to a fun party. Sandra heard the old lady's voice and a satisfied grunt in response. When Sandra entered, Mary was sitting in a chair with a bag of cookies, and Sergo was at her feet impatiently waiting for the next batch of treats. But that wasn't what caught Sandra's attention. The antique closet that stood by the door was ajar, and there were a number of things hanging on the shoulders, and among them, 2 white medical gowns. Tomorrow. That was the first thought that had crossed Sandra's mind when she woke up. Everything will happen tomorrow. Or would it? But now she could feel it subconsciously with her spine. It would. The air was electrified, as if before a thunderstorm. It was crackling. The pig that lay at her feet snorted in his sleep. He slept like a cat on his back, hooves up. Sergo hoped for a quiet morning and pancakes. Sandra often baked him pancakes, and if he was lucky, with a banana. Bananas were the pig's favorite thing in the world. Sandra stroked his belly with 2 fingers, careful not to wake him. She could read his thoughts even in his sleep. "You mustn't eat so much," she said softly. "You'll be like Esther. Do you know about her? Her owners took her in as a little piglet, thinking she was a thoroughbred and would be 2 peas in a pod. But she grew up to be a big horse. I mean pork. I was going to say pig." At that moment, she almost envied Sergo to the point of tears. She too wanted to think about pancakes and bananas, about beads and panties, about a snow-white beach and a warm sea where she had been several times in her distant childhood. But instead, you have to figure out how exactly you're going to be killed. Why this question did not arise, it was already seen. And yesterday when they had talked to Chris, they too each of them knew why. They're young. The body works like clockwork. And every part of it costs money. A lot of money. And it's so tempting to catch a man in your web like a spider to a fly that no one will be looking for him. Sandra took out her cell phone. She put it under her mattress at night in the same place, so that even in the dark it could be fumbled for it at any second. Maybe she hoped that by sheer force of will she would hypnotize the future, change it. Sandra also knew that today was the last time she would see this forum page, this picture. The cell phone showed only the future, but not today. And so she looked at the photo with triple attention. Who was lying on the stretcher, her or Gloria? Both had wavy, shoulder-length hair. The face of the woman on the stretcher was turned away from the viewer, and the blood ... guess which one it was. The orderlies are not even visible in the darkness, just white coats. Gloria was arguing in the kitchen. Sandra listened and realized that the faucet was leaking and there was a puddle on the floor. It was good that Gloria noticed in time, otherwise the downstairs neighbors would have come to beat them up. Or, at the very least, they would have made them make repairs. Gloria opened the door without knocking, peeked in.
I called a locksmith. He won't be here until tomorrow. No dishes in the kitchen, only in the bathroom.
She had that tone again of the landlady who owns the whole apartment. Then she reached Mary and repeated the same information to her. Sandra wasn't going to eat breakfast at all. She couldn't eat a bite. Sergo had dry food, enough for one day. God, she'd have to think about where to put him if. None of her friends would take him, except Chris. He seems like a responsible guy. At the very least, he'll put Sergo in the care of a society for orphaned pigs. I think I'm going on a wine diet, Sandra muttered, pouring herself a full glass of Spanish red. The bottle had been in her locker for a long time, intended for her birthday. But what now? Chris called as Sandra reached to pour herself a second glass. I found out something else, he said. Interesting. Well, Sandra hurried on. Let's meet. Not like yesterday. There's no time for emotions. You have to listen to me, understand and remember everything. Sandra realized he does not want her to cry into his vest, does not want to see her like the day before drunk. Such things are reported sober. And I'm all ready. She said, I mean everything. I'm stoned. They met in the park. Sergo, whose memory was no worse than that of a dog, immediately grunted unpleasantly, pissing out tone. He hoped that Chris, like an old acquaintance, had brought him something tasty. At first Chris waved his hands guiltily, but then he fumbled in his pocket for a candy, which Sergo ate with delight. They walked slowly down the alley, and Sandra was not interested in those who looked back at the pig. In general, in your room before this drunkard, lived a young guy, said Chris. Not for a long time, less than a year. Can you guess what happened to him? Sandra held her breath. And it got bad for him. But when he was taken out of the apartment by the paramedics, this fellow looked pretty decent. Only on the stretcher lay very pale and completely out of it. Our new acquaintance is, after all, a lot of fun. They come up with different ways of suicide. The orderlies in the yard said the kid had taken some pills. I don't believe that, more likely some kind of quick-acting injection. One thing I do know is your favorite old lady was home at the time. She opened the door for them. They probably changed clothes at her place, Sandra said thoughtfully. And in the other houses, the ones on my map, it's the same story there too. After the young people left, someone temporary would move into the rooms. Someone who wouldn't last long. An old dandelion, an alcoholic, that sort of thing. It was a kind of padding, so as not to attract attention. So that no one would wonder what kind of unhappy apartment it was, huh? That suicides in it one after another. And here God's dandelion went out into the world quite peacefully, according to all the rules, and the funeral was with a wake. Can someone help us? For Sandra, that was the question that decided her fate. Well, I mean, do we have enough evidence to go to the police with all this? Are you kidding me? And don't look at me hopeful. I don't have an investigator I know, a sensitive investigator who's going to get in there and bust this whole system. Because it's a system, I'm sure of it. So that's it, Sandra summed up, lowering her head. Even if she moves out now, we'll rent a place somewhere else, just tell me on what the system will only stop for a little bit. And then the spider will weave its web, and someone else will go to dismantle. I don't know any operative, said Chris, but I know a gangster. True, in the past. But that, as they say, is not forgotten. You never forget. You could wait. Watch. To gather facts, but you can't tomorrow. I have to save you. And yes, tomorrow you won't leave the house, as someone is probably watching. Whether you're in or out, it's probably your Mary spying. Oh, she's a tricky old lady. If, as you say, she's lived here all her life, she's seen a lot of things. I'm sure there was more than just this guy who was taken away, and before him. I haven't dug deep enough.